Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another video. Today, I'm here with James Elias, another YouTube content creator who just uploaded um, two videos that are about a really interesting topic. I thought I watched them. There, he also has one about Jordan Peterson that I didn't watch yet, but the other two I thought were really interesting stuff, and I was like, this is someone who I want to get on this channel. And I took a bunch of notes on his videos because I have a lot of questions. It's very complicated stuff, but you should definitely check him out. We're going to be talking about those videos for a lot of it. And yeah, do you want to introduce yourself further, or?
Yeah, my name's actually James Ellias. It's an Arabic last name, so the pronunciation always gets like mixed up. It turns out my grandpa was from Iraq. Now you know that about me. But yeah. So I mean, I think there's a lot of things. There's a lot of things I can say, but let's just dive into your questions. And I'll kind of and as we go through them, I'll kind of also explain what sort of the story behind all of this is and where it's going. So,
All right. So I guess sort of the first thing that I wrote on my notes, which was before that I started rewatching your videos and like writing down actual notes of what I wanted to ask, was the whole like friend analogy. And that was something that I think like in a chat that we had before this, when we were like kind of setting this up, I talked a little bit about, or we talked a little bit about, and you said that was like the only thing that like ran. So like you're kind of talking about an error that Peikoff made with like the hierarchy of how he sets up Opar, and like you're critiquing certain things that Peikoff said in that sense. And you say that Rand never really made that error, so to speak. And then basically what you pointed to was this like friend analogy that Peikoff talked about in his Understanding Objectivism lectures that Ayn Rand was like said okayed and said these are a good thing. And I mean, do you want to summarize that so that they know what?
Yeah. So what I've done in my videos so far is first I have a video which clarifies a certain aspect of implicit premises. What I find is a lot of objectivists will misunderstand implicit premises. They'll think that it's some kind of set of premises and some kind of conceptual material that you hold in your subconscious. And I think what this leads to when you're trying to introspect, when you're actually trying to integrate objectivism into your soul to make yourself a more consistent human being and to live your life in line with these values that you've rationally accepted, in order to actually apply that philosophy and introspect, a lot of objectivists will find themselves condemning themselves for things that aren't actually, they'll condemn themselves for things that aren't actually wrong with them. So like one really common example that you hear about is Ayn Rand points out that certain kinds of music has a negative sense of life. And so some objectivists will notice like, oh, well, I like that same music, or I like Metallica, maybe like I like, this gnarly metal music. Like, does that mean I have some sort of hidden premises that are really bad? Well, if that's the case, I should dig in there and change them. And what I clarify is that an implicit philosophy only exists insofar as your mental content is integrable with a given philosophy. For example, if you listen to Beethoven's symphony, which one is it that's really malevolent sounding? Its name is Fate. Dun, 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 dun,
Yeah.
dun, dun. I forget which number it is, but
I think it's fifth, maybe.
The fifth, maybe, sure. Yeah. So it's called Fate, and it's this. Here's my interpretation of the song, like emotionally, is there's this joyful voice, and then it gets crushed by a voice of doom, and then the joyful voice comes back, and then it gets crushed by a voice of doom, and then the voice of doom wins in the end. Like that's just such a it really is a malevolent song. So someone might say, oh my God, if I like this song, then there must be some kind of premise within me that's really hampering my ability to enjoy life. And on some level, this might be true, but it doesn't mean that you have some sort of secret conceptual material. You have some sort of secret sense in which you think that life is hell and life is suffering. What's more likely is you hold narrower premises, or you have certain emotional associations which are integrable with that thesis. Although music is really hard, so you may just like it for completely different reasons.
Yeah, I think that's what it usually is the case with music too. I think it's, I don't know. I'm critical of people who like hear certain things, and kind of what you're saying when people hear, like, say somebody likes a certain song, and like I really like rap music, and then people can look at me and say, oh, you must have some bad premises integrated into you, or, and then it's like, no, I just like it for certain positive things or certain positive reasons, that whatever. But with the whole, I guess, where should I go from here? With that whole music thing, where would these, like, the reasons that you like this music, you don't know them explicitly a lot of the time. So like, where are those sort of things stored if you don't believe in implicit ideas?
Well, a lot of times it is your in my view, from what I've come to see. And by the way, I should say something. All of this stuff, I'm just going to say, all the stuff I'm saying in this discussion is off the cuff, unfiltered stuff. I don't necessarily stand by all of this. Like, in my channel, I want to be very serious about only putting forth things that I know for sure. And so if you will watch that video about implicit premises, I'm very careful not to go past what it is I actually know. Whereas what I just did here with the Beethoven thing, I've gone into part of my knowledge, which I'm not certain of. But I think, so take it with a grain of salt, but this will kind of help you understand the thing that I am certain of, which is that implicit philosophy exists only so far as the things you hold explicitly and certain non-conceptual material in your mind is integrable with a given philosophy. And we'll get into that more in detail, but
so, like,
I'll give you an example of what you just asked about. I used to really like metal music. And I could tell you some explicit premises I held, which made me like the music, and had nothing to do with the idea that like life is hell or the world is suffering. Like, that wasn't what I held explicitly. What it was that I'll note two things that I introspected is, number one, the idea of a glorious struggle, the idea of like, you have to work hard and you have to take risks to achieve things that are worthwhile in life. And metal dramatizes this incredible struggle, and it's painful, but there, at least in the metal I like, there's a sense of glory to it. There's a sense of like, I can overcome great things. I can overcome great obstacles. But there's sort of, at least even for me, part of it is just, I think, sort of non-conceptual associations in my mind, which said that, which associated the achievement of values with suffering, which associated, like, if you want to achieve great things, you're going to have to pay the price. You're going to have to suffer. Now, I didn't hold that explicitly. I mean, actually, at one point I did, actually. When I was young, when I was like 15, I explicitly held this. And then, of course, once I became an objectivist, I didn't believe that anymore. But I think a lot of emotional associations left in my brain, just the way you associate some things with others, caused me to, when I hear about this epic struggle that, James Hetfield is singing about, or, Dragon Force is singing about, there's something that appeals to these emotional associations. When I hear about pain and struggle, I think of, like, I also think of glory and honor and achieving something big. So
couldn't we argue that those, like, emotional associations that you make, those would be pretty much what implicit ideas are, from my understanding?
Yes,
absolutely, that's what they are. So then what is the misinterpretation that people, so implicit ideas are real. You're not arguing against implicit ideas as such. It's more reframing them to make sure that they're strictly held within that sort of bounds, I guess.
To make sure we understand them clearly. So, like, Onkar actually answered a question of mine about this when I didn't understand the issue very well. And Onkar said, he emphasized two things. This implicit philosophy, it's not held conceptually. it's held in the, so like I didn't literally hold the idea great things require suffering. I didn't hold that, but I had a bunch of emotional associations which were consistent with that thesis. And so as a result, I had a certain response to metal music. I'll add that I don't anymore. Over time, I eventually, upon like kind of identifying this, like putting into words that which was consistent with the emotional association I held, after a while, I'd listen to a lot of songs and I'd just be like, all right, get over yourself. Like, you're not 15 anymore. Like, you should live a life where, like, yeah, there's a struggle and there's effort you have to put in, but you should strive to enjoy that struggle. It shouldn't be, it shouldn't be like warfare where it's hell. Like, we worked very hard so that we can live lives that are not constant struggle and suffering and warfare. Like, enjoy it. So over time it kind of went away. But yes, the implicit ideas are real, but they exist only insofar as your explicit ideas and this sort of non-conceptual content, like associating one thing with another thing, those sorts of things are consistent with a given philosophy. I didn't explicitly hold that greatness required suffering, but I had a bunch of emotional associations between different concretes, which were integrable with that thesis. And so as a result, I liked certain kinds of metal music. So does that answer your question? I went on a little of a rant.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that actually answers a lot of the sort of things that I was questioning, because I was like,
cool.
Wait, he's dismissing implicit ideas as such? Like, he's like, but what about the fact that I hold certain like subconscious values or subconscious premises that lead me to certain emotional responses of things? And like, I can see those things through introspection. I can see sort of when I have an emotional response, I can see that I think this certain thing, so then it brings this emotional response almost out of me. And if
Absolutely.
that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And that's a real thing, but we have to understand it in terms of the material that's actually held, not in terms of, well, we have to be, so not in terms of the material, the high level philosophical assumptions that it's consistent with. Although you can talk about generically, someone has a malevolent sense of life, or someone has rationalist habits, right? Like a lot of times what I find is, you've probably heard this, right? Is they'll say like, oh, well, young objectivists tend to be rationalistic. You've heard this,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah, I think actually when I heard that the first time, I was like, I mean, maybe, but I don't know what they're talking, what that actually means. I didn't have any like explicit like sort of, or some concrete examples of that. And then over time I realized that like, oh, I'm doing this. I'm making these mistakes. I think watching, there's a point where I watched Peikoff's what was it, Objectivism Through Induction, like the first episode of that, and he like literally calls out a specific thing that I was doing. I was trying to deductively prove causality from identity. He explicitly called it out as rationalistic, and I was like, oh, maybe I'm doing more rationalistic things. And I think actually back to the whole like implicit ideas sort of thing. I think a lot of objectivists do make sort of rationalistic associations between certain behavior. This is kind of what you're talking about, that between certain behaviors and these like they say like, oh, I'm exhibiting this behavior, and this would be integral, as you say in your videos. This would be integral with this really negative philosophy, and they just rationalize that, oh, it's caused by this, without actually introspecting and looking at what the roots of that behavior actually are.
Are you moving on to introspection, or are you still talking about the rationalistic deduction of causality? I got a little lost there at the end.
It's sort of, I guess it's sort of a similar integrated thing, because like if you exhibit a certain behavior, you can rationalistically like sort of deduce that, oh, this comes from this premise, without actually seeing it introspectively, without actually coming to it through induction.
Yeah. Okay. I see what you're saying now. You're saying that the error I point out is actually an instance of rationalism. Mm-hmm. That's absolutely true. Yeah. You don't want to make the error while correcting it. And I'm not saying you are. Sure. This is just important to clarify it. It's right to say that, like, well, let's go back to the simpler example, so we're not making this super meta for the audience. If you're trying to deduce causality from the law of identity, and you think that's what's required to actually understand causality, instead of going outside as Peikoff does and
Mm-hmm.
seeing causal interactions actually happening before your eyes.
Mm-hmm.
If you think that in order to know causality, you have to deduce it, that premise can only make sense if the rationalist epistemology is true.
Mm.
So in that sense, it's rationalism. But it doesn't mean you have some kind of subconscious allegiance to the rationalist epistemology. It's not like you actually think somewhere in your subconscious that ideas are to be derived primarily from other ideas and not from sense experience. It's just that you hold a more concrete view, in this case, the proof of causality. You hold a more concrete view in a way which is integrable with the broad view of the rationalist epistemology.
Yeah, yeah. And I think actually, like, a better explanation for that would just be like, oh, a young age. Like, I haven't actually gone out and integrated all these things, and I want to just come up with a sort of easy deduction from identity to causality without actually going out and inducing this sort of thing. Which is the real reason. It's not because you're like implicitly holding all of these rationalistic thoughts and all of this rationalism in your subconscious. It's that you just don't want to put in the effort. You haven't put in the effort yet to understand these things. Which is why rationalism is so common for young people, I think.
Yeah, well, so I mean, there then just becomes a question, like, you know, are young objectivists systematically context dropping because they're prone to rationalism? Or are they systematically context dropping because they're young and don't understand the whole context in which a lot of these philosophical beliefs apply? Well, so it's like, so it's true that like what you were doing, and this is great that you caught the error, and this is exactly the purpose of Peikoff's lecture, is so that like objectivists like you who are young, or objectivists who perhaps are old but actually don't understand the philosophy very well yet, it's so that they can hear this and say, oh my God, that process is consistent with rationalism. And I already know that rationalism is wrong. So it allows you to correct it. But again, like it's only helpful to identify it as rationalism so that you can identify that it's wrong. It doesn't really help you in terms of introspection to label it as rationalism. Because what I find is a lot of young objectivists, they'll just say, oh, well, I'm a rationalist about this. And then it's like, and then that's it. It's just like, okay, I admitted I'm wrong, and now I'm just screwed. They're like, well, no. It's like, okay, you can see that it's wrong, and there isn't some secret rationalist boogeyman Descartes running around in your subconscious. Just one at a time, correct the way that you view each of these concrete issues. You know, when you catch yourself trying to deduce, you know, in a vacuum without integrating it into all the other facts that you know, then, you know, stop doing that. If you're young and you realize that you don't have the full context yet, then, you know, don't shoot your mouth off and you know, pretend that you know things you don't yet know yet. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I guess now would be, now that we kind of laid out the sort of general idea of what you were trying to get at, I think now would be a good time to sort of go back to that whole, your criticisms of Peikoff's sort of Opar, I guess, and they put criticisms of the whole his formulation of how you integrate the concept of friend, or how you formulate the concept of friend. So it seems like, okay, so basically your argument is like he starts with friend and says, oh, you need to have this concept of esteem to come up with friend, and you need to have this concept of value to come up with esteem, and esteem to come up with friend, and all those sort of things. And then your argument essentially is that no, you need this concept of friend before you can identify what esteem is. Like you can't know what esteem is without having concepts of people who you feel esteem for. However, like it seemed my I guess my initial response to your argument or my initial thought on your argument would be like, but don't you need to like know what esteem is to be able to identify what a friend is? So isn't like this integration, this forming of the concept of friend, where you like integrate all these individual aspects of friend, doesn't it rely sort of on knowing what esteem is implicitly almost? Like that's sort of my response to that initially.
Right. So that's good. This is exactly what I sort of the locus of what I want to clarify. So it's true that to hold someone as a friend, to treat someone as a friend, you have to feel esteem for them.
Mm-hmm.
So as a result, friendship is dependent on esteem. And to esteem someone, to feel esteem towards someone, to hold them in esteem, you have to be engaged in a process of valuing.
Mm-hmm.
And to hold values of this kind, you have to have engaged your free will. So there's a sense in which, so I'm crawling up this hierarchy, right? Where it's
Yeah.
friend, esteem, value, free will.
Mm-hmm.
So this is all true, but you don't need to be aware of esteem or value or free will in order to hold someone as a friend and then form the concept friend. You just notice, I feel about this person the same way that I feel about this other set of people. And if you're clear on your concepts on the first level, for example, if someone asked you, is your mom your friend? You'd say, well, no.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to say no, not at all, because that, you would, because you love your mother and esteem her just as you love and esteem the friend, but you can tell there's something different. So you don't want to necessarily, if you're clear on your concepts on the first level anyway, then you'll say, no, it's not the same thing. But you may hesitate because, and the reason for this is you hold this concept at a not on the first level, but on a relatively low level. It's just you feel a certain way about the friend, you feel a certain way about your mother, and so you'll form these concepts. You'll form the concept friend in accordance with that. And that concept, if it's to be valid, must be consistent with esteem, value, free will. But you don't need those concepts first in order to form the concept friend. And the reason, and this next part's important, the reason this gets confused, I think, at least among objectivists, I don't know what's going on with Peacock, but I think what lends a lot of credibility to this mistake is the idea of implicit ideas. There's a sense in which the kid holds esteem, value, volition. There's a sense in which he holds these implicitly because he's valuing the friend in a way which is integrable with these concepts, which is integrable with, but that doesn't mean he holds, there's nowhere in his subconscious does the concept esteem, value, or free will exist. It's not floating around in there in some kind of secret form. It's that he holds a lot of concrete cognitions, which cause him to esteem the friend, cause him to value the friend. And he had to put those cognitions in place because of his free will. But that doesn't mean he actually holds those concepts he needs those concepts in order to hold the concept friend.
Yeah. Essentially, I'll just kind of sum up your point and tell me if I'm getting anything wrong. So he has, basically, when you're forming this concept of friend, you have all these different people that you consider your friend, and then you have this sort of vague sense of, oh, I have this similar feeling between all these people. You're not sure exactly what it is yet, but so then you sort of identify them.
Sure, I would. Oh, sorry.
You sort of conceptualize them together as friend, but you're saying there's an error with what I was saying there.
I guess I just jump in to say it doesn't have to be vague. It's just a concept that isn't formed in terms of other words. You don't have a definition for it yet because
there's no other instances of it. I guess like you just have it with this specific group of people. So like there's
other cons.
Oh, sorry.
You don't have other concepts which would allow you to describe this concept in terms of other concepts. So for example, like you form the concept man explicitly and precisely, not vaguely, before you're aware of rational and animal. Even though rational animal is the definition of man, like you can form the concept of man precisely within its context without the words involved in the definition. And this is a similar case with friend. I think friend is much more advanced than the concept of man, but you're not holding it vaguely. Like you're omitting the measurements. Well, I don't want to say that. You're forming the concept based on what you're observing by observed differences and similarities between different relationships with you and others. Which is why it's possible for a kid to form the concept quite precisely and say, my mom's not my friend, even though he values her. Well, more than a friend. But go on. But does that clarification make sense? It's not that it's vague. It's that it just can't. You're not at a stage in your hierarchy of knowledge. You're not at a stage in your inductive progression where you can actually put a definition to the concept.
So like you'd almost need more instances of like certain concepts that you esteem to form this concept of esteem. So like you have friends, this is a group of people you esteem, and then you have like enemies, this is a group of people you don't esteem, and then you have family members, you feel a different sort of esteem for them, and then you sort of like once you have all these different instances of different concepts, then you form this concept of esteem, but you don't already have this concept formed when you're just forming the concept of friend,
right?
Even though it like relies on this concept of esteem, sort of.
In a sense it does, but that's when we get into the causal hierarchy.
Yeah, and this would be kind of be in the sense in which the concept of esteem would be implicit in the concept of friend, but it's not necessary in proving the concept of friend. Sort of. That's kind of how correct. You framed it. Yeah.
Yes. In order, so it's important to differentiate the two hierarchies, and that's the purpose of the second video. Is there's this inductive hierarchy, whereby somehow you learn really basic concepts: man, rock, dog, all of these things.
Level stuff.
Perceptual level stuff. Then you accumulate enough of those concepts somehow that you start to become aware of relationships between people. When you look at really young kids, they don't have friends. They may play with other kids. You may even look at a bunch of 3-year-olds and they're playing with the other kids, but it's not really friendship yet. A lot of times they're kind of ignoring each other. They don't really, so it's like they don't really have friends yet. But at some point, you're at a level of development where you can form such a relationship. And then later you've learned enough to actually identify the relationship with this word friend. And you can get there in your cognitive development without the concepts like esteem, value, volition. However, you must hold the concept in a way which is consistent with esteem, value, volition, or else it's not really a friend. So an example I could give of this is Sam Harris is a hardcore determinist, right? Mm-hmm. He thinks, you ever watch Sam Harris?
A little bit, not much. I think I watched like one determinist video, and it's like I didn't like it very much. It didn't make much sense rationally. It was just seemed like a lot of bullshit.
Yeah. Well, so like one like really gaping example of how much BS determinism is full of is when you think about Sam Harris and you imagine him having a friend or, being in a romance. Like Sam Harris has this incredibly flat affect, which is consistent with the thesis that he is a deterministic of meat acting out things that the universe predetermined for him, right? Like his tone is consistent with that. Oh, and I just decided that he was a bad actor. Like he doesn't even say like evil person. He uses this phrase bad actor.
Oh my God.
Which is completely consistent with his idea that there is no free will. Well, anyway, here's a funny little thing to put your mind in smoke. Imagine what is Sam Harris like when he's having sex? Like what is his romantic life like? Like it's not what an objectivist's romantic life would be like. Like I chose you of all women. Like I chose you. You are the thing that represents my values. Like you're the one who represents my value. Like that means something to you because you chose it. And then we have Sam Harris over here who thinks he's one piece of meat bumping into another determinist piece of meat, basically. So So in some sense, like Sam Harris can't have friends. He can't have romance to the degree that he takes his determinism seriously.
Yep.
Why?
Yep.
Because romance and friendship relies on the idea of esteem. But that's a different issue. It's an issue of the facts about our free will condition the facts about romance and friendship. But that's different from I need to know free will in order to understand, in order to know friendship. You can know friendship before the thought of free will or determinism has ever crossed your mind in the slightest.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's what, like the sort of, you need to know free will. Like the free will would just be like what the implicit idea would be, but it's not something you actually hold in your subconscious yet. It's just implicit in the formation of it. It's, I guess, sort of integrable, as the word you like to use, with your formation of the concept of friend, rather than being something that is actually held in your mind before you form that concept. So that's sort of what you're trying to reframe here. And I guess you sort of start your second video with this question, I guess, of epistemology. Like, how do we know our first things or learn the basic concepts without having an epistemology? And so essentially your argument would be, like, we sort of learn those things, we sort of form those concepts and discover, and the epistemology would be integral with how we form those certain things. It would be implicit in how we form those certain things, but not actually held in our mind. It'd just be integral with the way that we form those basic concepts.
And well, here's the thing. It's not necessarily integrable. Kids make mistakes. You know, like I said, the kid if you're young, you can form early ideas. I don't know if you can form first level concepts incorrectly, but you can form a lot of these early ideas in a way that is inconsistent with higher level philosophy. And as a result, you'll get it wrong. You'll get it wrong on the concrete level, but you can notice your wrongness on that concrete level and correct yourself on the concrete level. And somehow through this process, through an inductive process, we end up, man accumulates enough information. And then what we've seen in history is geniuses like Aristotle and Rand integrate on a massive level and identify a big integrated, consistent way of looking at all of this stuff. And then people like Plato, have tried and failed to do that. So, and that's the way in which you can inductively reach philosophy. It's not through implicit premises.
Yeah. I think I'm watching your video, like, that whole concept of, no, children do make these mistakes, but, like, reality sort of corrects them. Like, over time they realize, like, oh, if you form a concept wrong, your concept won't refer to something in the future. It won't refer to something truly in the future, and reality will contradict that. So then you sort of, by the requirements of reality, you need to fix that. And if you don't, you're just going to be wrong, and you're going to sort of develop a bad epistemology. And then from there, sort of, once you learn what sort of things you can do, what sort of things you can integrate, what sort of concepts you can form, and how you do that, then after that you sort of set up an epistemology based on your past errors, or based on, like, avoiding your past errors and doing the things that got you the valid concepts.
I mean, absolutely. And alternatively, you can form an epistemology that doesn't attempt to avoid or make up for your past errors. You can instead form an epistemology which doubles down on your past errors. If you don't want to admit that you're wrong, what's the best epistemology you can accept? Skepticism. We can't know anything. Well, there's no way you can prove me wrong because no one can know anything anyway. So, like, that's the ultimate get out of jail free card. I mean, you don't get out of jail, but you get out of judging yourself, and you attempt to get out of getting judged by others. So Rand noticed this. She talks about how James Taggart, like, okay, so this is spoiler alert for Atlas Shrugged. Have you read Atlas? Have you read the whole thing?
Yep.
Okay. So just for your audience, I speed ahead, like, I don't know, 30 seconds, because I hate it when people spoiled Atlas for me.
I got Atlas spoiled so quick for me.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's too bad. So anyway, at the end, and this is a hell of a thing to spoil, so skip ahead, please. At the end, James Taggart goes nuts because he realizes he wants to kill John Galt, even though killing John Galt means economic disaster and his own death closely thereafter, like his own death. James Taggart will die if he kills John Galt, yet he wants to kill him anyway. And Rand says, basically, this was his philosophy all along, is what Rand says. And I think what she's pointing to is the fact that James Taggart evaded his whole life. And this is the climax of it. He evaded on a concrete level. Like, Francisco could drive the boat better than him, and he hated Francisco, which might be an innocent error. He's a kid. Francisco made him feel bad. He doesn't know any better. So he doesn't like Francisco because Francisco made him feel bad. But that wasn't the sin. The sin was later. He didn't check his premises. He didn't ask, hey, did Francisco actually do anything wrong? Or is it just that I felt bad that I didn't know how to do pilot the boat properly? And he did. So he never checked his premises. And what this leads to is it leads to a series of rationalizations. It leads to being a socialist in politics, leads to believing in out. And then once socialism gets discredited on the concrete level, what do you have to do in order to double down on that crappy belief? You have to be an altruist in ethics. You have to say, oh, well, maybe it doesn't work in practice, but it's really what's good for, it's really like what's virtuous intrinsically. Okay. And now what do you have to do about your view of concepts in order to justify holding altruism? Well, you have to believe in intrinsic concepts which are just true this way, regardless of the evidence. And so you can see you can build for yourself an evil hierarchy, an evil causal hierarchy as you go up. And this is what Rand talked about when she talks about how bad philosophies are a system of rationalization. So all of this stuff involving implicit premises, which I talk about in the video, or rather, all the stuff Rand talks about when she talks about the power of implicit premises. I'm not doubting any of that. I'm not refuting any of that. I'm clarifying the process by which these implicit premises have efficacy and the causal process by which they manifest.
Yeah.
So that we don't have to think about Freudian hidden premises.
Yeah. So I guess that's another sense of implicit premises I actually wanted to bring up too. Like I think a lot of times in my notes I wrote like, oh, but what if you just I don't remember any. What's the specific? Whatever. It was like, oh, but what if you actually believe this in your mind, but you like say this explicitly, like you believe something else, or you tell yourself that you believe something else, and that would be another sense in which implicit premises are valid because it's something that you're just evading. You're evading your actual like implicit sort of philosophy.
You know, Rucka brought this example up with me in a text message, actually. It's a good, I think you just now stated it more clearly. So hopefully this answers Rucka's question. So what you're saying is, let's make this concrete. What would be an example of what you're talking about? Let's say,
I'm trying to think of the people that you had in your let me check if I have any examples. I can see if I can find it in my
I deliberately made those cases really straightforward, so I don't think they could. Here's an example. Let's say,
like remember that like business owner Bree, where she was like she holds that idea that she wants to make as much money as possible, but like she could evade that. She could evade that and tell herself that like, oh, she doesn't actually believe this, but she still sort of acts because of it.
Oh yeah, okay, that's a good example. Nice. So it's a little different from my Bree example because with Bree, like I'll tell you about Bree. Bree's not a real person, but I had to like project like a very consistent sort of person in order to make the example. Bree is your typical like conservative Christian American where she thinks, I mean, she's a Republican. She thinks that making money is great. She just doesn't understand the philosophical level at which making money contradicts her religion and her altruism. She just doesn't understand it. She's just on one hand, she's like, oh yeah, give to the poor, blah, 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 blah. And then she goes in and she makes money. And she just doesn't understand how one contradicts the other. But let's imagine a different version of Bree, as you're saying. Let's imagine a version of Bree who's a little bit, maybe she's not a Republican. Maybe she's a liberal. I think a lot of Silicon Valley people are like this. Let's say she goes in when she first starts and she says, I'm going to make as much money as possible. She says that to herself explicitly. But now you're telling me when she's faced with this in a different situation, when she, let's say, she's asked to support some sort of leftist cause which would undermine her industry. Let's say she works for Uber, and let's say she's some executive who works at Uber, let's say, and some sort of regulation comes across and comes up for a vote that would damage Uber, that would damage Uber's business. And now what she has to say is she'll have to like bullshit herself into saying, well, I'm not really concerned with money. I'm concerned with the public good. And one way that she might BS herself is by voting for this bill, saying like, oh, well, see, I really like am publicly minded. Like I'm not just interested in money. And so, okay, so your point here is, isn't there a sense in which there's some kind of implicit altruism here, which is contradicting her explicit egoism?
Yeah,
or maybe the
like,
other way around.
Yeah. In that case, it would be like an explicit altruism, where she's like saying, "Oh, I'm going to donate to this because I care about the common good," but implicitly, like, she has this sort of egoism as well.
And she's denying that implicit egoism. She's trying to pretend to herself that it's not there. Well, here's the thing. You can have two unintegrable views, obviously. What's her ethical view? She's an altruist. She explicitly said that. What's her view on business policy? I'm going to make as much money as possible.
Yeah.
She holds both explicitly.
Does she need to?
But what she's doing, but this is really important. What she's doing is she's missing the integrability of her business policy. She's denying, evading the fact that maybe she's evading. Some people just aren't smart enough to see it, but I think a lot of people evade this. She's evading the fact that her business policy is integrable with egoism and not integrable with altruism. And now she's doubling down on her altruism in order to deny the integrability implications of her egoism. Of her decision to make money while she works. Yeah. You see, so like there's no subconscious, there's no hidden premises here. It's just the question is always, what are the implications of the ideas you explicitly hold?
Yeah. Okay, so one more sort of question related to this. So like, would it be possible though for her to sort of hold behave sort of in a money-making way in her business, but like tell everybody, say to everyone, even say to herself that even while she's doing this, that she's not actually selfish. She doesn't actually care about making money for her business, even though she sort of acts that way and sort of contradicts what she's saying explicitly.
Yeah, absolutely. That's possible.
Yeah. So, I mean, that would be a sense in which
you're claiming that in this instance, there's a kind of subconscious egoism, which she's trying to deny even to herself.
Yep.
So again, the way I would explain this is that she doesn't have subconscious egoism. She doesn't have conceptual material that integrates ethics on a high level, but it's hidden. Right. She doesn't have that. What she has is she has a bunch of concrete directives, which are explicit. For example, when I do my taxes, I'm going to report things honestly, but in a way that causes me to pay the least amount of taxes possible, right? So that's not egoism, but it's consistent with egoism, right? Yeah. When I sell a product, I'm going to make the best case that I can to sell the product. So she has all of these concrete directives, and these concrete directives are integrable with egoism. And so that seems to then contradict her explicit altruism, but it's not that there's a subconscious egoism. It's that all of the things she consciously, explicitly, concretely put there are integrable with this higher egoism, but she doesn't hold egoism on a high philosophical level. She holds the altruism on the high philosophical level. And that's where the conflict, where the conflict occurs. It's between her concrete actions. It's between the concrete action implications of her narrow business practices and her broad, explicit moral views. That's where the conflict occurs, not between explicit ideas and subconscious ideas.
Okay, so then, like, in those specific concrete examples, she'd just be like, so yeah, what you were saying, like, she has specific concretes where she acts in a way that's egoistic, and she acts not because she claims it's egoistic, but because she's like, oh, I want to pay less taxes in this instance. And then, but in general, like, in a different sort of action, like the action of thinking to herself about whether she's a selfish person or an altruist, she thinks, oh, I'm an altruist, I'm fine, and she ignores the implication that those things are egoistic, and she'll tell all her friends, because she actually believes this, oh, I'm an altruist, I always act in the betterment of society at the sacrifice of myself.
Right. Or in the case of many Silicon Valley people, in order to block the integrability implications of their business practices, they will engage in altruistic actions in order to block that from themselves and others, in order to block those implications. Because people understand implications, like on some level. They're able to see, like, oh, this is inconsistent. They understand that, like, what they're doing in their business is inconsistent with the broad philosophical convictions that they hold, because it's kind of obvious. Like, okay, well, oh, you should always live for other people. It's like, well, what the hell am I doing when I go to work? Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I think that touches most of the things that I had written down. Hold up. I want to double check, make sure I mentioned everything that I wanted to talk about.
Cool. I probably should have. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah, what were you gonna say? Sorry, I'm just looking through to make sure I got it.
I was just gonna say, like, I think we went through that, like, insanely fast. We did like 3 hours of material in, like, I don't know how long.
Yeah.
I have no idea. That what was it?
It's been 45 minutes. Yeah, so about as long as your first video. We covered basically my thoughts on that. So yeah, definitely, like, watch those videos too. They go very in depth, and yeah, like, there's a lot of like examples and characters that you come up with, which I thought was really cool. I liked all the characters. I think the first time watching through, I was like really struggling to, like, grasp sort of where you're going with this, or like, oh, did you actually answer this question that you set out to answer at first? So then, like, when I was doing my notes, I'd like write down the question, and then, like, when you came back to it, I'd like write it down and write your answer to it, and sort of talk about things like that. But yeah, I think. So yeah, you have, like, I don't think we really talked much about, like, your criticism of Opar in this sense, and how Peikoff sort of categorizes things. So, like, how would you sort of frame that?
Well, we did go over the criticism of Opar. So the only part of Opar that I think is flawed is really the reduction of friend. Peikoff is in when he reduces friend, Peikoff is trying to show us, is trying to give a demonstration of how we prove knowledge. And this is insanely important, because this is how we know our knowledge is true. And so he gives an explicit method of this, and he does the friend reduction that we criticized earlier in the video. He says, in order to know friend, you have to know the concept of esteem, and in order to know the concept of esteem, you have to know the concept of value, etc. Yep. And so what Peikoff is really doing there is he's going through the causal hierarchy of friend, not the inductive hierarchy, not the set of actual mental steps you'd need to go through in order to form the concept of friend, but he's going through the inductive hierarchy. So he makes a mistake in that regard. In another regard, though, I have to really say this. In another regard, this is not a mistake, because this is very important. When you're checking a concept, you have to do two things. What objectivism teaches us to do two main things. First of all, you have to make sure that your concept refers to reality. You have to make sure that there's actually sensory evidence for this concept. Yep. And second of all, and this is equally important, you have to make sure that this concept is consistent with everything else you know. Objectivism teaches us to do these things, and these are incredibly powerful. I think, though, that the Opar friend reduction doesn't really demonstrate this very well, because it confuses the issue of making sure it's consistent with sense perception. It confuses that with integrating that knowledge with everything else you know. Peikoff tells us that he's about to reduce it. He tells us he's about to do number one. He tells us he's about to show the inductive basis, the sense perception basis for friend. He really does the second. He integrates it with all of these higher level concepts that it has to be consistent with. So, so that's the error. But if you look at what Rand actually does, and I say this is an error in objectivism, because Rand herself was present for this example, this friend example, this friend reduction, and she didn't have Peikoff change it before he put it in OPAR. So I'm guessing she was on board with this. So like I say, this is an error in objectivism. However, when you look at the way Rand actually proves her concepts, she doesn't make this like she doesn't like this error doesn't end up affecting the efficacy of the way she checks this. Like, for example, she asks, why do we even need ethics? Why do we even need ethics? And then what she does is she actually goes back to the sense perceptions. Like, okay, well, what facts of reality even give rise to this? And so she says, well, man can suffer and he can feel joy. He can live and he can die. Like these are the facts. This is why we need a code of values. She also integrates it with everything else we know. She's forming this concept according to a correct epistemology. She's forming this concept in accordance with the fact that we have free will, because she says, man has free will. He doesn't have an automatic course of action the way an animal does. So he needs a code. That's one of the causally higher facts which conditions ethics. And as a result, we need a code of ethics. We need this written out, explicit system that we choose to follow. And so in practice, Rand doesn't get anything wrong, but she doesn't account but this example does not account for what it is like one actually has to do in order to prove a concept. So that's the very delimited sense in which this is a mistake in objectivism. It's a small mistake, but if we undo it, it's going to lead to some seriously cool stuff. So
yeah, for sure. So
did I?
that makes sense. I think I think that's kind of a important sort of distinction to make between that whole that's one thing that I really like, that whole like causal hierarchy where it's like, oh, these things below, like friend needs to be conditioned by esteem and those sort of things. Or like your examples with like ethics needs to condition politics needs to be conditioned by ethics. And there was one really good one that I'm trying to remember. Oh yeah, egoism needs to condition, what was it, rights. Like you need to understand egoism to do rights. And like the whole argument where it was like Peikoff got the question of if the dude goes onto an island and sees some coconuts and he's about to starve, and then he sees, oh, this is private property. Should you respect the person's should you respect the person's private property rights at the expense of your own life? No, because egoism is the context that you need to consider rights in. So a causal hierarchy sort of keeps this larger context under which everything else needs to fall. Under which everything else needs to fall, even though inductively you'd sort of I don't know if this doesn't make perfect sense when it comes to rights, because you don't learn of egoism through learning rights first. But like with other sort of things, when you, like with friend, for example, you need to learn friend before you can learn esteem, and like that's how the inductive hierarchy works, which is the reverse of the causal hierarchy in some instances, which not necessarily.
That's right. That's exactly right. This is an interesting point. That was a good recapitulation. So I'm glad I'm glad I'm being understood, if only after 2 listens. And thank you very much for putting in the effort to listen to it twice. I really appreciate that.
For sure.
If I was clearer, then maybe it would only take one time, but you know,
no, it's very, I think I have ways to go stuff.
It really is. Like, I mean, you really have to know objectivism pretty well for the lecture to even be appropriate to you. So good on you that you got all of this from it. So anyway, oh yeah. So what's interesting is that the inductive hierarchy most of the time appears to run in reverse of the causal hierarchy, but not all the time. It's not like a general rule that it's in reverse. It just so happens, it's just basically more abstract ideas tend to be at the top of the causal hierarchy.
Yeah.
And more abstract ideas tend to be harder to learn. You need more earlier data to learn the more abstract ideas. So as a result, they tend to be near the end of the inductive hierarchy. And so that's why they generally tend to be in reverse. But that's a good example. Like, you don't really learn egoism from rights, right? Yeah. Like, you don't, although there could be some sense in which, like, maybe, I don't know, maybe you thought of it this way. If maybe you start as a libertarian and you're on board with rights, then somehow that leads you to egoism. I know you were a libertarian before you were an objectivist. So, like, I don't know, was that how it worked for you? You must have been on board with rights before you were an egoist, right? You were a libertarian, like, or were you one of those libertarians who's just like, I want to smoke weed and shoot my gun in the air?
Nah.
I doubt you don't seem like.
I was very interested in rights. I was really into like Lockean property rights actually for a long time.
Wow.
When I was learning Rand, actually, I was like, not for a long time actually. That's definitely an understatement. It was maybe like a month or two that I was interested in Lockean property rights.
Okay.
It was actually at a similar time that I was learning objectivism. So I was trying to like integrate Lockean property rights and objectivism and like make my morality based on Lockean property rights and objectivism. So like it was a really weird mixture, but yeah, there's a sense in which I started with rights and then sort of worked back to egoism. So maybe in like my process, that's how it worked.
Yeah. It's really going to work differently for everyone. And you're in any one person's inductive hierarchy is going to be pretty, for philosophy, is going to be pretty jacked up. Like there's it's all over the place. But one of my ambitions is
that actually reminds me of a thing from ITOE that in the conversations at the end that Rand was talking about with the professors. It's a really small point, but it was just like Rand sort of says like, yeah, there's not like a necessary fixed order for inducing things. Like you can induce different things at different times in different ways, but there is a sense in which there's kind of an order. Like there's a general order that you should follow. Like you can't induce love before you induce man. That would be absurd. You have to induce certain things first. But
that's right. Yeah. Right. That's a good point. I wonder if. No, I'm not sure. Anyway. So the place that this is going is for me is these two different hierarchies actually really help us understand how to prove things. And so I'm developing a theory of how to actually prove things in science. And once I have a sense of how that theory will go, I'll apply that theory towards actually proving math and science in its inductive order. And that whole time, as I'm be creating a causal hierarchy to allow us to integrate that knowledge. And we'll see where that takes us.
That's interesting.
I'll just say why I'm doing this, I guess. The reason is because I agree with David Harriman that modern physics is extremely flawed, to say the least. That basically I have a degree in physics. I have a master's degree in physics. I've been studying physics for a very long time. And so even in my state of knowledge, anything after the year 1920, with a few exceptions, anything after the year 1920, I basically don't even bother looking at, because it builds off of a hierarchy. It builds off of a context of knowledge I'm already uncertain of. I'm already uncertain of quantum mechanics and relativity. And those came out in early 1900s. Those came out around 1910, 1905 time. So anything that's built on that, I don't know how to interpret any of those claims, because they're built off of a foundation that's already, don't know what the hell it means. And I certainly haven't proven it to myself. And I'm extremely doubtful of any modern physicist who thinks he's proven it to himself. I suspect more that he is taking earlier physicists on faith and not really doing what's required of him as a physicist. So the plan is to induce our way all the way to quantum mechanics and relativity and figure out which part of those theories are right, which part of those theories are wrong, and
Ooh.
see if we can figure out something new. That's the plan.
That's interesting. Yeah.
So
Physics is, I know a decent amount of physics, but it's definitely, I'm definitely a lot more interested in mathematical stuff. But yeah, I had a whole conversation with Existence University about like quantum physics type stuff, and yeah, I don't know. I don't have much to add to that. I just sort of think that yeah, what the science tells us, what the science tells us we should accept, and sort of, I don't know. Like I don't
yeah,
know
I mean,
enough
I
about
think I
that
don't
opinion.
know. Yeah, I mean, I don't know is the right opinion to have, because I can tell you, I've been studying quantum and relativity for years, and I don't know. I know enough to
Mm-hmm.
know that we shouldn't accept it, especially because when physicists talk about what they're doing, they use language which is impenetrable to someone honestly trying to understand it. And then he, as someone who's like has studied this stuff, a lot of times the words they're using is just straight up wrong.
Hmm.
um so there's just a lot of confusion here, and we need to actually prove this stuff using sense perception, by building up from sense perception and accounting for all of our logical steps. And I'm coming up with a system for doing that, and
Yeah.
gonna apply it to that. So
That's dope. That's
yeah.
dope.
So
Yeah,
I
there's
don't
so,
know is the right is the I don't know. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, yeah. There's. I mean,
I
you can
don't
tell
know.
by. Oh, you can. Oh, okay. You can tell. You can tell by. We keep starting, and then
we keep
yeah,
ramming into each other because
yeah,
of the delay.
yeah.
Uh, I don't know is exactly the statement that opens you up to actually knowing in this
Mm,
case.
yeah. I mean, you can tell by how many. Like, there's so many different, competing, like completely contradictory theories about quantum mechanics, and it's like, why is there? I feel like if this was more scrupulously understood scientifically, that would be there would be a lot more consensus on a lot of these issues, and a lot more consensus on like what does this thing actually mean. Like I've looked so many times at like different quantum physics videos, and there's like, oh, what's the wave function, and everybody's like, I don't know, we don't know what it is, it's just a thing, and without actually like, yeah, and there's just this whole concept in physics without actually like a good definition of what it is. Now it refers to reality. Like there's certain things it seems like it's referring it. The equations predict reality, so I'm on board for that. But we need better interpretations, I guess, of what it actually is.
Yeah. I'm I agree with the spirit of what you're saying, but due to a bunch of technical issues, like I don't want to get up into, like, I'll just say one of them. I don't like the idea of there being an interpretation,
Mm.
because that implies that the math sort of speaks for itself, and then you can tack on some sort of physical interpretation onto that math as a kind of afterthought.
Mm.
No, first comes reality. First comes what it is you think is going on in the physical world. Then you derive from that, or I'm sorry,
Yeah.
then you create a mathematical system in order to describe those cause and effect relationship that you're apprehending.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sure that you didn't mean to do that reversal, but your
Yeah.
statement was integrable with that
Hmm.
reversal, and I wanted to correct
Yeah. How do they come to these equations? I guess without like referring to reality first. Like they have to be referring to something in reality. Like we know that the,
it.
like we know that these equations like say true things. Like we've done experience with them, and we know that they say true things.
Damn, that you're absolutely right. I'm trying to think of a quick way to answer that question without giving an entire documentary on this. I'll just tell you about the quantum wave function. The
I.
quantum wave function is that's the wave
Mm-hmm.
equation,
Yeah.
this thing. It gives you the probability of finding the particle at any one location.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have no idea why the particle lands where it ends up landing,
Mm-hmm.
but we do know that it's consistent with this equation. So the equation means something about the particle, but we're not sure what it means,
Yeah.
other than the fact that it predicts where it's going to end up, where it's likely to end up landing.
Yeah. So I mean, can't
So
you?
like,
isn't
Yeah,
it? Wouldn't it be proper then to find an interpretation in reality for that, or like,
absolutely.
yeah? So like,
Well,
but how is that reversing to say like, oh, we see this thing in reality, or like we have this thing
oh,
that's already been formed and we see that it's true for reality. Now let's come up with an interpretation for it.
okay. Good question. So I should have been a little more precise earlier. I don't think science consists of taking a guess as to a
Yeah.
physical cause
Mm-hmm.
and then going out and seeing if the experiments are consistent with that physical cause. You can't, that implies that you're allowed to just form whatever the hell hypothesis you want. Um, and it's like, okay, let's form some kind of hypothesis and then
Yeah.
let's test it and see if the experiments come out consistently with that hypothesis. That's incorrect. That's not a good way of saying things, because it leads to the following. It leads to, oh, well, maybe space bends and that's what causes gravitation. And then you write certain equations about how space is supposed to bend. And then you see that the planets actually move in that manner. And
Yeah.
you say, oh, well, space must bend then. But you haven't proven that. You haven't shown me what it even means for space to bend.
Hmm.
So you haven't even shown me what it means for space to bend. All you've shown me is that you've somehow come up with an equation which is consistent with observations. But that doesn't speak to like how it is this actually relates to your physical hypothesis about space bending. I'll give you another example. This is even more insane. Like, this is the kind of stupid crap modern physicists engage in. The physicist, I forget his name, but he said, what if every electron is actually the same electron? So if you've heard of this, electrons are a certain particle that are part of, yeah, right.
Yeah. What?
Electrons are a certain particle that are part of matter. They fly around the nucleus somehow. Okay. And every atom has many electrons. Hydrogen has 1 electron typically. Helium is 2 electrons. They all got different numbers of electrons. There's bazillions of electrons in the universe. Okay. And this physicist says, dude, what if every electron is actually the same electron and it's just like teleporting around and like switching positions? And from this insane hypothesis, it somehow is consistent with certain experiments. But the thing is, but like, just because your insane hypothesis is consistent with the experiment doesn't mean you've proven a damn thing. There's an infinite number of insane stories you can come up with that account for the results of experiments. I mean, here's the simplest example is before we knew that the sun was at the center, Ptolemy, the Greek astronomer, thought that the earth was at the center, and he actually had a really convoluted model to explain how the planets move through the sky. And it involved like, here's the earth in the center, and the planets would move in a circle on top of a circle. They'd move like this. And that was how Ptolemy accounted for what you actually see in the sky, even though his hypothesis is wrong, that the earth is at the center. So you can come up with, if you're willing to smoke enough weed and come up with a hypothesis crazy enough, like, you can account for any observations you want. So that's not the way we do science. You don't look at the observations or you don't take math and then try to come up with, like, after the fact, come up with interpretation, because then there's nothing restricting you. Anything that's consistent with the math is now fair game. Instead, what you have to do is you have to understand those causal relationships, which are understood already. We have to understand, well, okay, what's the evidence that even led us to believe that an electron exists? The electron's supposed to have a negative charge. What evidence that made us think it had an electric charge? The electron is supposed to move like a wave. What was our evidence that the electron moved in a wave-type fashion? What does it even mean to move in a wave-type fashion? What does that mean? What sort of causal interactions do you see? You have to reason from that data. not from the math, and then come up with some kind of story that's consistent with it. And to know and to reason from that data, you need to understand it.
Yeah. All right, yeah, that makes a lot of sense actually. Like yeah, you can't just come up with any arbitrary idea that you want. Like you could smoke enough weed and come up with any arbitrary thing that you want, and then you can come up with equations to like kind of work around that and explain it and say, oh look, these equations are consistent, but like so then that means my idea is consistent. But yeah, that's an interesting characterization, because I mean that's what some of these things do seem like someone just gets so high and they come up with like, oh, what if this were true, and then like, oh, it might actually be true. Oh my god, this is so crazy.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's fun.
And all of this has because real scientists who did real work back in the 1920s like we're actually able to put equations to a lot of these things, and it led to the nuclear bomb and a lot of other achievements. So they were doing something right.
Yeah.
But then when they talk about the fix, they don't have any kind of, they don't explain what the hell they're talking about. They don't understand the foundations of their own science. They're repeating and regurgitating things they heard from their professors, who are repeating things they heard from their professors, who are repeating things from the people who understood it in the 1920s with really irrational philosophy. But we don't know what we're talking about anymore in physics. So I'd like to know. I'd like to. I wanted to be. I started when I got a degree in physics, and I wanted to be a physicist. And I've been stymied at every turn because no one's willing to actually explain this. I'm like, so I'll do it myself.
Yeah, there's actually some parallels to this that I think kind of exist in math too, because in math it seems like there's a lot of people who they'll just come up with, derive all these crazy equations, all these crazy ideas, like 1 + 2 + 3 ... equals -1/12, the whole like -1 of the Riemann hypothesis, and then like, what does this actually mean? Now let's explain it. Like, oh my god, it doesn't make any sense.
You're talking about the number wankers, right?
Oh yeah.
And by that I mean number file. That's what I call them, because it's like math to them is just this big game. Like it pisses me off, because it's like we're alive today because of math, and you want to treat it like it's this 1 + 2 + 3 + 4 equals -1/12. Like F reality. Reality can go to hell. Like we are, because we can, just fly in the face of everything we know to be true. And how do they get away with this? Is they don't explain the context in which that sum comes out to -1/12.
Oh yeah, there was a I like number file to an extent. Like I like the math stuff. I like a lot of it, but that video was egregious. And Mathologer, he made a video responding to it, and is like, this is all bullshit. Like this is like there's a sense in which you can calculate it, like with the whole like Riemann zeta function at -1, with the whole like analytic whatever, which I don't fully understand because I'm not that high of a level of math yet. But there's a sense in which it's right, but not in the sense that they're explaining it in. Like there's and I don't know. I feel like I don't know. It seems like sometimes in math too, though, when we do that like extension of the Riemann zeta function and like that sort of thing, like is that referring to something in reality first before we do it, or are we just like playing with numbers sometimes?
I'm honestly not sure. I suspect that it relates to reality, but that relationship is lost to history. It will have to be dug up by someone. It probably won't be me, because I have enough on my plate as it is.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
maybe a mathematician can figure that out. I mean, this is a really good example you've brought up with this Riemann zeta function. Like it's invented as some kind of abstraction. I think like it was to make certain kinds of calculations, like forget it.
For like, well, a lot of it is like actual real numbers. Like when you go above 1, it's like, because it's just the sum of like 1 over or what is it, like 1 over something, or 1 over
It's the sum of 1
1 over n to
over
the n to the s, yeah, right? Because it's the
n
Riemann
n
zeta
to
function
the
of
n,
s.
1 over x, or 1 over n to the s. You're right. Yeah,
Yeah,
1 over n to the s,
yeah. So
where
a lot of it,
s
like,
is any number you.
yeah, yeah, any number, but yeah. So like some of it, it's true. Like on the real number line, when it's greater than 1, like all those series converge. But then they like extend it to the like negatives, and that's where it's weird, because if you use that sum and plug in -1, you get 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 dot 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 forever. And then the
Yeah.
Riemann zeta function, the sort of extension of it, the answer is -1 over 12. And apparently there's context which they use it in physics that works. I don't know. I don't
Yeah,
know
but it's
how
in
I feel about
string,
physics.
it's in string theory.
Oh,
So at least the number wankers is what they said, or number file. They said that they use this analytic continuation of the Riemann zeta function in string theory. But I can give you another example of the context in which this is true. If you look at number file,
sure.
they prove this sum. But they play a dirty little trick.
Yeah.
They use the following sum. They call this. I may not have a real blackboard here. Nope, dry as a bone. Let's see what they do. This probably isn't going to work. I mean, use this. Okay, so hopefully you can see this.
Yep.
They use the following series.
And they say it's 1/2. Yep.
They say it's 1/2, which is stupid because the series dot dot dot, it goes on forever. They say that this, you can barely see what I just wrote. They say that this series adds up to 1 plus 1 minus 1 plus 1 minus 1 plus 1. They say it adds up to 1/2 when it doesn't really add up to anything. So, but here's the thing, like, that's called a Cesaro sum. It's when you take, what is it? You take the limit of the average of the partial sums.
Yeah.
It's a certain way of taking the sums. So like when you do that, there's some kind of context, apparently, where a Cesaro sum is appropriate. And if you use this Cesaro sum, you can prove that result that they talk about, where they get -112. So what this tells me is I'm using causal hierarchy here, actually. There's some kind of context in which a Cesaro sum is appropriate.
Yeah.
In that context, 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4, etc. In that context, that sum adds up to -112. I don't know what that means, but I've isolated the context in which that statement means something. But outside of that context, it's meaningless.
Oh yeah, for sure. And in the general context of what addition is and what it means for things to add up and be equal to something, then it diverges. It's obviously infinity. It's absurd to claim that it becomes a negative number.
Right. And these clowns just want to act like they're smart and blow all our minds with this, and it's really irresponsible and represents placing your own stupid vanity above your love of mathematics.
For sure.
It just really pisses me off.
Yeah, and the thing about mathematics, like most of the time, it seems like mathematics is still relatively okay in this regard. It seems like we're still very strict about like making sure that things actually make sense and formulating things they actually refer to in reality. So like normally when there's that 1 plus 2 whatever sum, it's like, no, this doesn't actually converge to -1 over 12. But there is a sense in a different sort of addition where it does. So they're usually very careful about this. But then when Numberphile did it, it's like, oh, this actually adds up to -112. Oh, look at this title. Whoa. Oh, click on our video. Give us some likes.
Yeah, it's very shameful.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So speaking of mathematics, you said that you're thinking about switching your major from actuarial to mathematics.
Not actually. I'm not thinking about switching it. I'm thinking about potentially in the future, like going on and learning more mathematics after like I finish my bachelor's in actuarial science and get a job. So I'm thinking about possibly like maybe going on in math, but we'll see what my context is at the time. But yeah, I love mathematics. Like lately, it's been something that I've really been into. Like, yeah, I've been like over the whole Corona break, I started watching a bunch of like videos online about like math and stuff like that. Like Three Blue, One Brown. If you've seen him, his videos are amazing.
He's fantastic.
It's so
Yeah,
good.
those are fantastic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've
Um,
been binge watching his videos, and like my journal lately has been full of proofs of, yeah, like, oh man, hold up, let's see if I can just find some stuff. Yeah, it's just full of different proofs of like
nice.
statistics and math and stuff like that. So I've been like addicted to proving different mathematical things, and yeah, I don't know, I really like it. It's just there's a sense in which it's just like, yeah, I just showed that this thing is true just from, yeah.
What is it that you like about mathematical proof?
Um, I guess it's fun to like sort of have like these basic assumptions, these general things that you know, and then sort of like prove something that looks really simple or very beautiful, or like that you can sort of compute, kind of. I don't know how to explain it.
Hmm. Hmm. Interesting.
Yeah, so I don't know. I find that sort of thing
That's
fun to
cool.
do.
Yeah. So I suggested Pat Corvini to
Mm-hmm.
you. I think, and but then I said like, oh, maybe it's too advanced. Like, no, I think you should listen to him. I mean, I had to listen to it a few times,
Yeah.
but apparently you're willing to put in the work and the effort. I think you might gain some. Her work is really good in
Yeah.
mathematics.
I
And then
actually
there's
I
also
actually
Robert Knapp.
I actually downloaded all those lectures and Robert Knapp's lecture and ordered his book. So like right after that, I'm like craving philosophical mathematics stuff. Like that's something I'm craving, because I love philosophy, I love math. I just need a good integration of the two. So that, like, I downloaded them immediately, and then I'm gonna start on one of Pat Corvidi's lectures. I forget which one it's called. I think it's like the one where it's like Zeno's paradox of like Achilles and the turtle.
Achilles, the tortoise, and the objectivity of mathematics.
Yeah.
Um, is that a good one to start with?
I,
Yes, it is.
I just know that I've like thought about things related to that before. I actually have some videos where I talk about like Zeno's paradox and like things related to time and space and those sort of things. And I was looking at her at like her study notes for that, and I'm like, this seems like something really interesting. Like this seems like something that I've thought about before. And
What do you mean her study notes?
there were like notes on that came
Oh, as
with the
part of
thing.
the download.
Yeah, as part of the download.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
With Pat Corvini, listen to her lectures in chronological order.
I
Like if you're not sure what order to listen to them in, just go to the e-store and then figure out which of the ones she delivered first and just watch them in that order.
Oh, for sure.
That's the best order. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe I'll
And so
start with a
yeah,
different one then, because I didn't
started,
check yet. Did I
I
start?
think Achilles is the first one, I think.
Oh
So
wow,
I
actually,
think you'll be
that's nice.
yeah.
I got
Yeah.
lucky then guessing the right one.
Yeah. You may want to check though, just in case. So
Yeah, no, I'll double
anyway,
check for sure, for sure. Yeah, does she like use different like things from past lectures to sort of does she like expand on future lectures?
only sometimes, but in general, they just get harder and harder,
Hmm.
basically.
Yeah.
So, I mean, one of them I had to listen to it 3 times to even like begin understanding what she was saying. It was gnarly hard, and I
Oh
did
wow.
that, and that was when I was 28 years old. So,
Oh
uh,
wow. Yeah. So there's a lot.
I, I believe in you only because of your tenacity. Like, well, and you've math. Well, here's the thing. You're studying math here. That's the other reason I think you'll be able to get it. It's like you've been studying math, whereas like I
Hmm.
I did physics for a long time, which had a lot of math, but I never focused on math as such. I wasn't doing proofs when I was 18. So I think these lectures will be. I think you'll be ready
Yeah.
for them, but you'll have to put a lot of effort in.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Well, they're not like crazy good proofs. I don't want to
So
overhype myself. It's like
yeah.
very very basic proving stuff. Like, but yeah, hopefully they should be pretty good to grasp. They seem interesting just looking at what I've seen so far. So yeah, I definitely appreciate the you telling me about like those different people, because I'm excited to start doing those things, even though it did cost me like $40 to download all their lectures.
Dude, it's worth, like, if you got as much as I got out of it, it's best $40 you've ever spent.
Yeah,
So
for
I
sure,
mean,
for
all
sure.
all of the knowledge ARI puts out is just there's some fantastic stuff on that eStore. So yeah, and I definitely recommend to everyone David Harriman. Like earlier I actually said that I was going to do it myself, but I'm standing on, all of my work is standing on the shoulders of Leonard Peikoff and David Harriman. And of course Ayn Rand behind them. So want to understand physics. If you want to understand the objectivist position on physics, start with David Harriman.
Yeah, sure.
It's not the objectivist position on physics, but it is a position. How would you put this? It's an application of objectivism to trying to understand these concepts, and David Harriman does a fantastic job.
So. Yeah, and I haven't read The Logical Leap yet, but yeah, it's important to clarify that like these sort of things, these aren't objectivism. These are like applications of objectivism, because objectivism would just be Ayn Rand's philosophy, and you don't want to make the mistake of like just like encompassing everything and saying that's objectivism, and that when it's not actually the case.
Who would do that?
I don't know.
Yeah, you don't want to do that. So
yeah, for sure.
You got anything else on your list there?
I don't know. I from what I remember, I think like I have a lot of stuff that was very similar, and we kind of like got a lot of it out of the way and a lot of it done quickly. And I guess a lot of it, like when I was like watching your videos, a lot of the questions just got answered later in the videos. So then I felt like I kind of had an explanation of that. But yeah, for sure. Do you have anything else that you wanted to talk about or touch on?
No, I think that's a good video for now. If we talk again later, I'll have a lot of other things, but just for the sake of like, I've like a lot of questions, but they're like so just out of left field. Like we could just do, if you want, we could just do a different video on that. We can just have a different conversation.
Yeah, I mean we could, or we could just keep it going and see what.
You want to? Okay, sure. What the hell? What the hell? Let's do it.
Because I mean, it's only like an hour 30 minutes. I have conversations where it's like, where it's like 4 hours and all crazy different topics. But I mean, we could do a different video if you wanted to.
Let's do this now.
All right.
So what has been the most influential aspect of objectivism on your life?
Most influential
so far. I mean, you discovered objectivism like 7 months ago, right?
No, it was actually like my junior year of high school, so it would have been.
Okay.
It would have been 2 years ago. So.
Cool. So what's been the most influential aspect of objectivism for you so far?
I guess a big thing. I grew up religious, and there was a sort of lack of pride in myself and lack of thinking that I can go and achieve things for myself. And I've become, I guess, less passive, and I've become more confident in myself and more confident in that the world is sort of beautiful and life is worth living, and there are things worth achieving. Because when I was religious, I was not a very happy person. I was very sad. I was very not proud of myself. I thought that everything, I would constantly like write about how I can't achieve good things on my own. And so like everything has to essentially come from God or from other people. And, that's basically the biggest correction that I think that I've had from objectivism.
Fantastic. It makes a world of difference. I was Catholic as well, kind of. I was raised Catholic, but I don't know if I was ever really Catholic. I was like, I believed in God, but I kind of like had I agreed with Thomas Aquinas's arguments for the existence of God. I didn't agree with the ontological argument. I agree. That's insane.
That's insane.
Yeah, it's such a bizarre argument, but like I just kind of thought, oh, well, that's the answer. Or like, how you know there's a God. Like, I guess everyone else who has faith, like they just needed the answer book. I guess they're just looking in the back of the book. Like, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to prove it for myself. But then I was corrected later. But man, that's huge. So it's just like you really like somehow integrated you somehow sort of took in the Christian teaching that like perfect human beings or maybe like
you cut out for a second there.
You really took in that Christian teaching, like, oh, we're human, we're only human, we can't really achieve that much. And I mean, Yeah, it's just so much more is possible. It's so great to hear that, because so much
Oh
more is
yeah.
possible to understand these ideas. Like it unshackles your mind in so many ways to
Mm-hmm.
learn about objectivism and to learn these things Rand figured out. And like it just makes you
Yeah.
so much different, so much more powerful. So
Mm-hmm.
it's great to hear. It's great to
Mm-hmm.
hear that you experienced
Yeah,
that.
and
And
I had so much less clarity back then too. Like I have a journal where like that was kind of my transition. You can see in my first journal just this transition of like at the beginning. Like my first journal entry was about an experience I had where I felt God, quote unquote, and the last entry is like taking notes from a Leonard Peikoff lecture. It's really interesting to see the whole transition. Um
nice.
but yeah, so I was really into the religious stuff. Like I was part of this, I guess, religious group where I would every week we'd all like get together and like talk about how we saw God in our lives. And actually, I could go all over the place with this, but okay. I talked. I was actually like really close to my priest. He would give me all these books, and I'd like read all these books about God and religion and all those sort of things. And yeah, I was really really into it, but I was also not a very happy person. I was not confident in myself either. Like the whole idea that in a few years I would be having a YouTube channel and broadcasting my voice to everybody when I like at these meetings where we'd all talk, like at these meetings I could not get out a single word. I would say like I would speak a sentence and then I'd lose my train of thought, and I would
Whoa.
become extremely mad at myself for that. And yeah, I was like, holy shit, I cannot talk to save my life, and I was so not confident in myself. And I guess over time, like objectivism has really helped me correct that. Like I'm literally on YouTube with like almost 300 subscribers and a whole bunch of extemporaneous videos. The whole idea that I'd be making extemporaneous videos, like not even scripted videos, is just crazy to me that I came this far, I guess.
I never would have guessed that that's something you struggled with earlier. That's impressive.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
It was definitely
Yeah.
a problem.
Huh.
So yeah, for you, what's the biggest thing that you've taken from objectivism?
The biggest thing for me was I was also, so like I was saying, I was also Catholic. I also took religion very seriously. Um, and the way I put it is I took it so seriously that I saw through it. Like I saw through it because I took it so seriously.
Mm.
Like he's like, this has to make sense. This has to be rational. This has to be the code to guide my life. Like this has to be the thing that makes my life mean something and be consistent with all that is true. And then that conviction led me to realize it was bogus.
Mm.
So, and I was also in these sorts of Catholic groups where we would talk about, I don't know if we talk about how we saw God, but we would like,
Yeah.
I would just talk about, we would just talk about life and like applying our
Mm.
morality to different aspects of life. Like, girls would talk about how they maybe struggled with eating disorders, like, and then guys
Mm.
would talk about how
The
they
struggles
were
with porn
ashamed
and
of
stuff.
masturbate or
Yeah.
something. Yeah,
Oh my
that's
god, I
basically.
remember that so clearly. I remember
Oh my
back
god.
when I would every time I'd go to confession, like, oh my god, I'm gonna have to confess it again. Oh, I feel so bad. I was so ashamed of myself too, because I would like I was so afraid, so ashamed because like I would just sit behind the confessional thing too and like do the whole kneeling thing rather than the sitting thing. And then one day I'm like, you know what, I'm gonna be brave. I'm gonna sit down and say it. And I would take like 30 seconds every time, just like, I can do this. I can do this. I can tell it. I'm so ashamed. It's
Oh
so
my god.
terrible.
God, that's so gross that like they
Yeah.
freaking did that to us. It's like the courage it takes to do that. You're like, this is the right thing to do. I did this thing that's bad. I, thought about women and touched myself. Sorry, I guess that's bad. So it's like,
Yeah.
anyway, but you didn't know any better. I didn't know any better. We thought this was a bad thing. We
Mm-hmm.
were told it was a bad thing. So we thought it was bad. And then we have the courage. And I did the same thing. I did like, I made a big deal. Like I'm going to look the priest in the eye. I'm going to look at the representative of God's, of
Yeah.
God. And I'm going to look him in the eye and say, I did this wrong. I'm going to try to do better,
Mm-hmm.
and that courage that we showed is turned against us, because all the people who don't take the religion seriously, like they don't have to suffer the consequences of this. They're whacking off as much as they want. you know, and they're
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, God will forgive me. Like, so anyone who takes it seriously,
Yeah.
they're the ones who it hits the hardest. It's,
Mm-hmm.
you know, we're like, this is sort of, I call this reardening yourself, when you allow
Yeah.
yourself to be punished for your virtues.
Mm.
Um, it's
Yeah,
just, that's,
yeah, that's interesting because like I remember that the concept of like unearned guilt right when I was starting was such a big deal to me, and like now it's like, oh yeah, obviously you shouldn't feel like unearned guilt, but like right away, like integrating that was really important because as a Catholic, like growing up, I would like guilt is something that is pushed on you, like that Catholic guilt is like this whole sort of cliche sort of thing that everybody talks about. So yeah, it's a big it's a big thing, this unearned guilt that comes from like masturbation just being one thing. That was holy shit, like
yeah,
over and over every single like retreat or like group discussion, it'd be like, all right guys, we're going to separate between guys and girls are going to talk about like I don't even know what I don't know, like the whole like, oh, you want to be chaste and you don't want to like show too much and that sort of thing, be modest. That was always the common thing for girls, and then for guys it's like, don't watch porn, don't masturbate. Oh, and
yeah,
it's like
yeah.
it's so
You have to,
forceful.
yeah, it's, um, but anyway, well, so that wasn't necessarily the biggest thing for me with objectivism. The biggest thing for me was the integration of reason and emotion. At
Mm.
least like at first, I mean, actually maybe throughout my whole life, this has been the most important theme actually, because when I explicitly I had an explicit philosophy written out by the time I was 17. And it included God. It was like it was kind of like a Spinozan Cartesian rationalism sort of a deal, where I started with certain assumptions. Like, I think my three assumptions were that the senses are valid, we have free will, and God exists. I think those were my
Hmm.
axioms. So like, I don't know, 2 out of 3 is not bad, you
So
know?
yeah, that's
So
true. That's true. The God exists is just completely arbitrary, though.
I thought I don't know why I thought I didn't my reason for saying that you have to, the first two I got right. Actually,
Yeah.
I said, I didn't know what an axiom was. I'd never read objectivism, but I said, if you deny the senses or you deny free will, you deny everything else.
Mm-hmm.
So like, you can't deny those things. So I didn't fully grasp it as an axiom, but I grasped an aspect of its axiomatic nature. Like, and so as
Yeah.
a result, you have to just, I said, you can't prove these things, but you must assume that they're true. So I don't want to give myself too much credit, but but then I went on to deduce a bunch of garbage from
Oh
that. You know, I
yeah.
was just a rationalist and kind of just used reason. I mean, this was actually a big deal. I used deduction,
Mm-hmm.
rationality, to just sort of deduce all of these things I had kind of accepted on faith. I just like thought like, oh, I really used faulty methods. It really was,
Mm.
um, you know, Rand made a big difference for me in that realm. But something that I concluded when I was around 17 is you really have to go with your reason over emotion. So I
Mm.
saw a lot of the result of holding emotion above reason. And I said, like, no, like, reason, you have to base your ideas on reason. And I thought that meant that you had to ignore your emotions. And then upon realizing, oh, your emotions are just responses to your values, and you choose your values and you can choose them according to reason. It was just,
Yeah.
it was such a huge game changer for me. That was the biggest thing for me.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, crushing that dichotomy is a big deal too because I was definitely someone who would be very repressive with my emotions just in favor of reason, just be in favor of being logical and yeah, rational, and I would like repress my emotions, and I was not a very happy person, I guess, because like repression does not lead you to very to positive emotional states. Um, but yeah, I guess over time, like I've become a more emotional person, a more like yeah, I have a much more wide range of emotions now than I ever did in the past, and that I mean that's helped me in so many ways. Like I'm like more charismatic because of it. I'm more happy in general because of it. Like there's so many ways in which just being a more like emotional, happy person helps.
damn, I mean, that sounds great. I didn't know all of that about you. That's really great to hear.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
Hmm. there's a lot to gain from objectivism. Like I'm always like, 10 or 11 years now working, using it every day to become smarter, more integrated, more emotional. There's so much to be gained, and introspection is one of the main ways to do it. So,
for sure.
Keep it up, man.
Yeah. And it's I guess it's always important too, to like, I don't know, like sort of grapple with these ideas constantly, like constantly sort of make sure that they're true, rather than don't ever like accept them as dogma. Don't ever accept them on faith. Like you can't, like there's times where I feel like I'm starting to get to that point where I'm just like, oh, accepting these ideas, like memorizing them. But then I need to realize like, no, I need to grapple with these ideas. I need to like, is this actually true? Is this thing that Rand's telling me actually true? And then I grapple with it. And then usually like I like sometimes at first I'll be like, wait, this isn't actually true. And then like I'll think about it, and then I'll grapple with it, and then I'll realize it's true. And I'll have a more deep understanding of why it's true, and like other things surrounding that sort of, like other things surrounding that principle.
Yeah, that's extremely important. Yeah, I mean, that's extremely important to do. Like, yeah, it's just, but wait, dude, don't we have to trust philosophers? Don't we just like have to?
Oh no!
And then as soon as a philosopher says like one bad thing, we just like throw everything else they said in the garbage. Oh, like Aristotle got the number. Aristotle thought women had less teeth than men. I guess we'll throw the law of logic out too. Like he was a rationalist. Oops, he didn't look at women's mouths to actually determine how many teeth they have. Because if he did, he would have gotten the right number.
Oh,
oops. Man. I guess. Yeah.
I don't know if I don't know if I want to get into.
You don't
want
to go down that.
No, I don't know. I don't know. I think I don't know. There's a sense in which I think Puya might have been misinterpreted there, because I think he's more trying to argue that like if a philosopher has bad methodology, you don't want to follow them to the edge of the earth. Like you have to be able to judge a certain philosopher. You have to be able to like. With like Charles too, for example, like if you realize that he has rationalistic tendencies and he has these problems, you need to like judge his methodology and then say that, judge him as a philosopher in general. I don't know if you can say like, oh, I don't trust this person and disregard everything they say. I think Puya made an error in that sense, but I think in general, like the general concept of him like creating, like saying that you need to judge a philosopher by their methodology is a good point. I think it's an important point.
So I was being very uncharitable to Puya.
Oh
right
yeah,
there,
for sure.
To be funny, I was just trying.
I know.
But I think
I wanted to clear it up for sure.
I think you're being too. I mean, Puya never said that. I think you're being too charitable. I think you're adding an important insight of your own, and just like you're trying to make what he said made sense by adding an insight of your own. And this is actually, I'll tell you, take it from me, take it from an old man. This is something, as someone who used to be Catholic, I don't know, Catholic objectivists, I think we tend to rear in ourselves a lot. At least, you tell me this story about you going into confession. You're like, I got to look this guy in the eye. I have to be brave and not sit behind the screen. You're going to look the priest in the eye is what you were telling me, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, like if you're that kind of guy, I think maybe you'll make a similar error to me. Is a lot of times to be generous to other people, which appears to be in your nature, and it's certainly in mine. Like a lot of times you'll be like over generous, and you'll take your own ideas and inject them into what the other person is saying, because that's the only way you can make what they're saying make sense. And you gain something from that because you learn something new when you make the integration, but that doesn't mean that that's what they meant.
I mean, I don't think Puya would make such a obvious error though. Like knowing from like what I know about Puya, I don't think he'd make such an obvious error of saying like, I think he does make an error in a sense to an extent, but he like, he's not like going all the way and saying like, oh, if a philosopher says like a few things that you can't trust. I think he's pointing to like, you want to judge philosophers based off their methodology. I don't like his framing of it in terms of like, should you trust a philosopher? Because I think there's a sense in which that's philosopher king-esque. Like there's it's very philosopher king-esque, because like it's saying that, oh, you need certain philosophers to think, and then you choose a philosopher that you trust. Basically, that's essentially what he's implying. That might not have been what he meant, and I don't want to think that's what he meant. And like in Rucka's video, he was very critical of KJ for basically saying that, for implying that that's what Puya meant, and I don't. So I'm probably going to confront KJ when I talk about that video. But I thought in general, like as a general point, you like the conception of trusting a philosopher. I agreed with KJ on that point. I thought he had good points in that video. But yeah.
Yeah, as I think I think I agree with you. As KJ is the analyze this guy. Yeah. Just so the audience knows. As KJ says in his video, like it's not clear what kind of mistake Puya is making exactly, and it's hard to believe that he's being as silly as what I'm implying, right? Mm-hmm. Like you're just it's not consistent with the way, because he's so good on many other things. Like we heard him speak for, or at least Rucka heard him speak for hours. I mean, you've heard him speak for many hours.
I've talked to him so much. I've heard so much of Puya lately.
Yeah. So, I mean, this position of his seems to imply a major mistakes. And that doesn't mean he holds those major mistakes, but what he's talking about implies or is integrable with it. It may actually imply those mistakes. It depends on what his position is. But yeah, it's one of the two. So it's like, that's something that needs to be hashed out in a full, rational, open disagreement. And you know what I think is great is that we have so many objectivist YouTubers now. We're talking about these ideas. We can disagree. Yeah. We can learn from each other's disagreements. We can learn from, we can just learn from these disagreements. I think it's going to be a lot of fun moving forward, and we're going to all strengthen one another as we move forward together.
Yeah, hopefully. It's interesting because we literally like ascribe to the same philosophical principles, but like there's still so much drama, so much beef between people. Like it's crazy. Like it just shows. It just shows like we're so like committed to these ideas, and like no, we need to interpret these the right way. So like if someone makes like a little mistake, we're like quick to jump on them and write like paragraphs responding to them.
Well, it is important. I mean, we shouldn't do it in a way where we're trying to hurt each other's feelings or whatever, but we have to put the truth above our feelings and the feelings of others. This is important. We want to get this right. If you think someone's wrong, and you think it's worth your time to respond, you got to do, or like you should do so. Because like I said, we're in this situation. We are a certain generation of objectivists. We have Rand gave us the Infinity Stone. Now we can but to use it, we have to understand it. And I think we can enhance our understanding of it together and reach new heights with it. And it's an exciting proposition. And it should be in a spirit of like, look, all of these people we've mentioned, like Puya, Rucka, like who we may have disagreements with, I think they all are really trying to understand objectivism. They're trying to do it. I think maybe they didn't say it explicitly like me, but I think they would all sign on to this thing I'm talking about. We can this journey we can take together, this intellectual journey where we're enhancing each other's understandings. Like I think we can all be on board with that. And we have to be willing to have thick skins. We have to be willing to hurt each other's feelings. We have to be willing to have our feelings hurt. We have to be serious about finding the truth. And it should hurt your feelings because these are important beliefs. Like you're going to have a lot of feelings about them. Like we're going to make each other mad, but we have to keep our eyes fixed on the truth the whole time and help each other acquire it.
Yeah. For sure. Well, I think you said when talking about people we disagree with, you said Puya and Rucka. I don't know if I disagree with Rucka on this specific issue because, like, I literally got my formulation for what I think Puya was saying from Rucka, like the whole thing of judging philosophers based off of like their methodology. That was Rucka's interpretation of what Puya said, and that's kind of what my interpretation is too. But the issue, I don't like the usage of the word trust philosophers, that term. So that's where I side with KJ for there and have, I guess, sort of a disagreement with Rucka, because Rucka is fully on board, it seems, with Puya lately.
Really?
I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know. I'm
I've
sure they
heard,
have their
we'll
disagreements.
see. Yeah, we'll see. Maybe this is, actually, come to think of it, um, I don't know how interested I would be in necessarily. No, actually, I think I am interested in this. Maybe this is something that that calls for a joint discussion, because to me, and KJ has said this too, this issue of like whether you trust philosophers or not,
Mhm.
this is related to the issue of reason absolutism. Like, do you think reason is an absolute? Do you think that knowledge comes only from your own independent judgment and observation of reality, or not? To
Hmm.
me, what Puya was saying goes against reason absolutism, but apparently to Puya and to Rucka, it doesn't.
Yeah. I
Um,
don't.
so
I
so
don't know
this is
if
worth.
Puya.
This is worth. We got to get this right. We got to get
Yeah.
this right.
Yeah,
Whether
for
we're
sure.
right or they're right, this is. So this may be worth having a powwow over and talking it over.
Yeah. I don't know. This might be me being this agreeable centrist objectivist that Rucka
Uh,
accuses me of,
okay.
but like I don't. I'm not sure Puya. Like a lot of the times when Puya talks about things, I feel like he uses terms that I disagree with, but then actually when we get to the substance of the thing, like we agree on way more than we disagree on. It's just the way that he uses terms sometimes like makes me like, wait, did you mean what I thought you meant there, or did you mean like the proper view, what I think is the proper view? And a lot of times like hashing out those disagreements is useful with Puya because we get like yeah, with our conversation, we had spent like 2 hours on the life and happiness question, and after that I got so much out of that discussion, because he's an intelligent guy and he pushed me on a lot of things, and I feel like I pushed him on a lot of things. I'm not sure what if he took to heart what I was saying, but I think like a lot of his formulations were similar to the stuff that we came to when he was talking to Rucka later. But it seems like Puya might be getting misinterpreted here. That's my concern, because
Okay.
I don't think he would imply that you can't. I don't know. Maybe this is something that I need to talk with KJ more about, because he's like actually the one who made the video.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, bounce that off KJ, because this idea of kind of having a powwow over this. Because I mean, something I'll say
Yeah.
is if you talk to ARI intellectuals, they'll talk. They seem to. I don't want to put words in their mouth, but they seem to have a certain degree of deference to the authority of academia.
Hmm.
They give a lot of credit to someone who has a PhD in philosophy, for example.
Hmm.
And that's an interesting preference, to put it
Yeah.
mildly.
I mean there's a
Right.
sense in which that's important though, because like philosophy is it's difficult issues, and it can be specialized. Like it's not like anybody can do it, but not everybody will like go and get a very technical philosophy. So it's like there's a sense in which we do need to judge philosophers and take some of the and like listen to some of the things that they say, and like we need to come to an understanding of it independently. But like the sort of ideas that are on the table, so sort of the ideas that are like on the menu for us to choose from come from the philosophers, and we can't consider every single philosopher and every single idea in our lifetime, because we don't have that time and we don't have that technical knowledge. So there's a sense in which we almost need to like come up with a heuristic to sort of get rid of some philosophers. Like, so maybe this, I don't know, I'm trying to explain a position, this Puya position in the best possible lighting, because there is a sense in which we need like a heuristic to cut off certain philosophers, those being the ones that we don't trust, and then keep certain philosophers that we like do trust.
I agree with this heuristic kind of thing, because I do it in practice. After reading
Mm-hmm.
enough summaries of Hegel, I'm like, all right, I don't need to
Mm-hmm.
like read the source material here. But
Yeah.
like I don't need to like read this in depth. Like the man is raving about how existence is like a mental entity, like is a single universal mind. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's there's only so far I can go, but so there is a heuristic there. But I think focusing on that heuristic leads to diverting yourself from the essential issue, which is that you have to make up your own mind. You have to,
Yeah.
everything you should act on should be based on your own independent judgment.
Mm-hmm.
And even in the case of the doctor who has specialized knowledge you don't have time to dig up, you have to be convinced within the context of you have to prove to yourself within the context of your knowledge that this doctor's solution is better than the alternatives based on your own context of knowledge. Like, so it's just, so you're right about the fact that these heuristics are play a role, but it's just not essential. It's not the essential issue. And so like, it's easy to sneak in positions which are integrable with dogmatism when you talk about these heuristics and make them seem like they're on the same level as thinking independently. So,
yeah, that's actually one thing that I've been sort of like ever since I've gotten involved in the objectivist community on YouTube. I've kind of clashed with people over like things related to dogmatism. And there's this lecture that I still need to watch. I don't know why I haven't watched it yet, but I just haven't gotten around to it. Where that I think Diego has cited to me, Puya cited to me, and they say that as a young objectivist, you should take these ideas sort of as dogma and then learn them like that. And I'm not.
What?
See, I don't like that formulation.
Ideas?
Like Rand's ideas when you're learning her ideas, and don't let your mind get poisoned by bad ideas. And that was I thought that was a really, really bad framing of things. So I've been arguing with people about that, and I think that's one thing that I've been arguing with Puya and Diego about it for I don't know. Diego's come around though. Diego's like, it was, I don't know, the whole thing with Diego was about my debating. So he used that as an argument against me going out and debating at a before I like fully understood the ideas. But then I basically explained to him like oh no, this is why I go debate. Like, I do this to learn the ideas better, to better see the context in which they fall when compared to other ideas. So I like conversing with people with whom I disagree. So, and then Diego understood that and was like, and we're good with that thing now. And Puya, I just haven't talked with him in a while about that. But I need to watch that. I need to watch that lecture to see if they're interpreting it correctly, or I don't know if I can speak to that as much as I would like to.
I mean, I think it's great what you're doing, debating people. Like, even if you're not ready, something you might want to say though is, although people should frickin' understand this, you don't speak for Ayn Rand.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I mean, so it's like, I'll say that too. I don't speak for Ayn Rand. I think I understand it, and I'm building new ideas off of what Ayn Rand taught me. But, you know, I mean, I mean, the thing is as long as you're a reason absolutist, none of this should matter. It's just Garrett says what he says. I agree with some of it. I disagree. James says what he says. I think some of it's consistent with Ayn Rand and some of it isn't, despite what he thinks. I agree with, you know, like, people can make these decisions for themselves. And so it's just like, I think this is why I find this. And then apparently they're saying you shouldn't go out and debate people because you might lose and make Ayn Rand's ideas look bad. Is that the argument?
I think some of it was just like, when you're learning these ideas, you don't want to get like polluted with all these other bad ideas, and then
that's definitely freaking wrong.
Yeah, see, that's I don't know. I have a big disagreement with that. That's,
you don't want to get polluted.
Yeah, I actually made a whole video where I like looked at the DDV show and had it in the background and responded to those comments. But yeah, I don't want to get too deep into this because I'm really worried I'm gonna misrepresent somebody, and then you're gonna go off on a misrepresentation from me. Like, go and look at the things for yourself. Go make sure you judge them correctly.
Okay, right. I haven't actually watched these things, but I'm reacting very viscerally to your account of them. So maybe your account wasn't accurate.
Maybe not.
Well, let me ask you something real quick. This lecture that they're talking about not polluting yourself, was this a Peikoff lecture?
Yep.
Was it the Art of Thinking lecture 1?
Yeah.
I thought so.
How did you know? What's the point that they're trying to, or what's your interpretation of that point?
That lecture is titled "Volition as a Means to Clarity."
Yep. That's the one.
And Peikoff is not saying that you shouldn't pollute your mind when you're young. He's not saying anything that would imply that. He's saying, here's what Peikoff is saying. I'll actually tell you what he's saying.
Sure.
And by
I'll still have to watch the video for myself as well. But.
Of course. Oh yeah, you should, because this is just. I mean, actually, I'll tell you. When I was 21 years old, I think I listened to The Art of Thinking, and I was driving in my car. I was listening to The Art of Thinking on cassette tapes, on freaking cassette tapes. Someone had loaned them to me. This old woman who was an objectivist was really nice. She loaned me her Art of Thinking. It came in this big plastic box. I'm putting one cassette tape in at a time, and I'm listening to this, and I was like, and about 3 lectures in, I'm like, this is what I want to do. What Peikoff is doing, he's using what he learned in objectivism to come up with new ideas. This is what I want to do. So The Art of Thinking was like a monumental lecture for me. Not necessarily because of its content, but just because of Leonard Peikoff, the man himself. Like, I could see what he was doing. I'm like, I want to do that. That's what I'm. So anyway, but in that first lecture, volition as a means to clarity, Peikoff is saying that if you have an old context, if you have an old philosophical framework, like you did, like I did, as Catholics, you were serious. This is especially true of you, especially since you've only been an objectivist for 2 years, or you've only known about Rand for 2 years. Like, what he's saying is if as you're changing contexts to the objectivist context, there's a certain psychological thing you have to do, is what he says. This is basically, like, the point he's making seems to me to be psychological. Disclaimer: I'm not certain of what I'm about to say. I'm only fairly certain of it. So this is not.
Go watch the video for yourself.
This is not my official canon, and as always, you should make up your own mind. Watch the video yourself to see if I'm interpreting Peikoff correctly. All of the usual things that should go without saying, but I guess I have to say them. What he says is once you understand that your old philosophy was wrong and your new philosophy is right, you're going to have to use volition, your free will, your effort to override your old habits. You're going to have to, for example, let's say you're walking down the street. There's a poor guy asking, begging for money, and you feel this sort of pull to give him money, or maybe you feel guilt. And the idea is Peikoff says, what he says is that guilt may raise certain questions, like, was I doing the right thing? Like, am I really sure I'm serious about my morality? He says, reject those questions, because they're coming from a faulty context. You've already disproven that context. You've already disproven the context of knowledge those questions are coming from. And so as a result, but the thing is just because you've disproved it doesn't mean that every single aspect of your automatized context, not everything in your brain is going to be consistent with this new objectivism that you've identified to be true. So you're going to have to, through an act of will, say no to the old context. Let me say something though. I suspect there's some kind of error in this lecture. I don't know what it is exactly. I suspect that there's an error because there's something, let me tell you, this lecture is actually, I think, the main reason that it's not the main reason. This is one way you can end up making the error I point out in my first video with implicit premises. This is actually kind of let me draw it out step by step, because this is actually really important. First of all, let me say what Peikoff is saying is right. If you know that a certain philosophic position is right, yet you're still tempted by the old one.
It's just integrity to, like, sort of push down those thoughts. Yeah, it would just be the virtue of integrity.
Well, you don't push down the thoughts,
or not push them down, but like
you act according to what you know is right, as opposed to your feelings in that moment.
You actively say, like, no, these feelings, or you say, like, not that these feelings are wrong, but that I'm not going to act according to them. I'm going to act according to the reason. I'm going to act according to what I actually know to be true. And these are ideas that you didn't accept on dogma. These are ideas that you questioned and did everything and actually determined are true. So yeah.
So I mean, part of what goes wrong with this lecture is what with people is what you just said, is that they think they actually have to suppress the emotions. But you don't have to suppress the emotion. You just say, okay, I feel guilty about not giving the money to the homeless man. Well, I know that guilt is coming from an incorrect value judgment.
Yep.
And I'm not going to push down the guilt. I'm not going to try to like rid it from my consciousness. I'm going to feel the guilt. It's too bad. I'm just going to have to feel guilty because part of me is still a Christian, so to speak. In some sense, I'm still a Christian because I still hold these individual concrete views which are coherent with Christianity. So I'm just going to have to feel the guilt, but that doesn't mean I have to act on it. And by not acting on it, by doing what Peikoff is telling us, like using your volition to just say no, or what you're saying, which is much clearer, like just have integrity, just act according to what you know is true, even if you have some emotion that goes in the other direction. Over time, you will automatize the context that you know to be correct now. So that's but here's the deal. If you make the implicit error, the error about implicit premises I talk about in my first video, it's a disaster. Or it can be. This is a disaster because here's what ends up happening. Let me think about this. I can actually integrate this in with the swearing example I give with the video. So in my example, I talk about a guy, and by the way, I talk about a guy named Rick. By the way, Rick is just me. Rick is just, this is just what I did when I decided to like reserve my to significantly.
I did the exact same thing. It was the exact same process. I actually think I went through that process on this channel somewhat.
Interesting. Although you've used a few dirty words you didn't have to there, but maybe just in the process of it. So, but anyway, I think I did too, but like it's vastly curtailed. Like I'm in the process of anyway. So I listened to Charles and he said swearing it means you're a nihilist. I didn't buy that, but like I was like, yeah, like do I really want to use the same word to refer to what I do to someone I love and what the IRS does to my rights in my bank account? Do I really want to use the same word to refer to both of those things? Like, isn't that gonna, if I make associations of that kind, isn't that gonna, curtail my enjoyment of sex and that sort of thing? And so I made an effort to just stop. And then I agreed with him when he said that these are dirty words which refer to like objectively dirty things like fecal matter and the like, like you're referring to these things and it's just you're just bombarding your audience with imagery that is unpleasant. So I'm like, hey, you know what? I'm going to stop. So, and then I tried to stop but then it came back. Now here's the deal. If I had misapplied Leonard's advice, I would have said, that's part of the old context. I'm just going to suppress it. But what was my old context? What was the old context that was causing me to swear? It was actually a good one. It's because sometimes swearing is a value, because being funny is a value. And one way to be funny is to present dirty things, inappropriate things to your listener, And so, there's a myriad of cases where you're trying to be funny and it really is funny. It really is a value to present, to present to your audience images of piss and shit and these things like, and it's absurd. It's out of place. It's gross, but like, that's what makes it funny sometimes. It's like, oh wait, there was a perfectly rational reason for me to be saying these words. Now, if I had misapplied Leonard's advice, I would have just pushed that down. I would have like cut myself off from premises which were there and were actually right on the premise that they seemed to be integrable with a bad context. So if you think about this in the greater picture, I think a lot of objectivists may have really misapplied this advice. I actually listened to this lecture many, many times, trying to figure out if there was actually a mistake in it. I can't find one. Everything he says is literally true, but I think the advice gets misapplied systematically. It gets misapplied all the time, and I certainly did it, because what ends up happening is you notice that a certain thought or question or idea or behavior occurs to you, and you notice, oh, that's integrable with not objectivism. So I'm just going to press that down like Leonard taught me. But that's not what Leonard is saying. He's saying, Leonard, like, what we need to see is you need to say, what's the thought that's actually causing this question or this inclination towards action or this emotion? Then once you've identified that thought, then once you've seen that that particular thought is wrong, then you suppress, and then you, I don't know if suppression is even the right word, but you decide not to act in accordance with it, using your volition, using your integrity. It's going to be a little hard. It's going to require willpower, because part of you wants to do that thing still. But the thing is, if you really understand what's causing you to go in the other direction, it doesn't require as much willpower as you might think. Like, once I realized, like, oh, this is the kind of swearing that's a value, and this is the kind of swearing that isn't a value, the conflict was removed for me, and it just wasn't that hard to get it right after that.
For sure. This seems like a really, really important principle then, like in this whole like in all those sort of like clashes between objectivists that are going on. Actually, I think I was probably falling into a similar, it's similar to that whole error that Frog Machine likes to talk about, where people like repress emotions, which is a really common thing, it seems like, with objectivists, where like there's this tendency to want to repress emotions that we view as negative. And that was something that I would formulate quite a bit, and I'd like to explain quite a bit, and then Frog sort of came in and corrected me on that. That's what a lot of his videos discussing me were about, and that was something that it took me a while to sort of integrate. But it seems like that, like with the thing that you're saying, it seems like that might be integrated with a whole sort of bad view of implicit ideas, and hearing things in different lectures that can be interpreted in ways where you view implicit ideas the wrong way, like such as that Peikoff lecture that we're talking about, where he's actually just saying you don't act based on those premises, instead of saying that you should push them down. That's how some people interpret it, and that sort of is consistent with that whole idea of implicit ideas being this sort of vague thing underlying you in your subconscious.
Yeah. Just to be clear, though, Peikoff does not make this implicit, this error of implicit premises in that lecture. Yeah. But he does talk about suppress. He does use the word suppress. He talks about suppressing questions. He uses that word. He talks about suppressing questions which come from the other context.
So then that might be something where I just disagree with Peikoff on. That's weird to say.
Well, it really depends on the context. I'm hesitant. You definitely listen to this lecture, because I'm on board with you that there seems to be something brought up during this lecture which ends up being a crux of a lot of disagreements between objectivism. And let me tell you, as someone who's been an objectivist for 11 years, I've seen this come up a number of times. This issue of authority, it seems like there's some objectivists that almost seem to be pro-authoritarian in epistemology. I don't want to misrepresent them, but it seems that way. I'll tell you, there was this philosopher a while ago, I want to say 6 years ago. Her name was Diana Shea. And she said some silly stuff. I think she was wrong on a lot. I think she was even pro-trans. She thought that maybe sex change operations were okay, which that doesn't make you a bad philosopher on its own, but I definitely disagree with that. But so she said, in my view, she said some silly stuff, but people they made the same point Puya was making, actually. It's we can't trust this woman. She's not a real philosopher. And she was just discredited and told that she was she was told that she wasn't a real philosopher, and people sort of intimated that she shouldn't be listened to because she's not, again, she doesn't really understand objectivism, blah, blah, blah. But it's just look, I mean, I didn't listen to her because I can listen to Leonard Peikoff, and I listened to a few
Yeah.
things from her, and she seemed to be wrong on a lot of things. And I just kind of said, hey, why the hell am I listening to her when I could listen to Rand and Peikoff and a bunch of other people who are getting things right? But like, that doesn't mean, I don't know. It just seemed, their response seemed inappropriate. That's like, we're going to go on a crusade against this woman who's just trying to be an objectivist philosopher and at worst failing at that. Like, what's the deal? Like, you can, I mean, if you want to go out there and explain why she's wrong on this one and that one and that one, and then talk generally about, hey, this woman has a habitually wrong epistemology. She approaches the issues incorrectly. Just as you can learn a good psychoepistemology from reading Rand's literature, there's a bad psychoepistemology implicit in what this woman is doing. You could make all of these arguments, but maybe that's all they were saying. Maybe that's all they're saying. There seemed authority kind of blended in there, though. Like it seemed like they were saying, like, oh, like we shouldn't trust her as a philosopher. When it's like, what the hell are you saying? I'm sure there's tons of people who've gained tons of good things from this woman. Even though, like I didn't think she was a great philosopher.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I don't know. I think that whole heuristic point I brought up earlier can be important in this sense, and I think. I don't know. It's kind of an issue of what we sort of emphasize in that. Like, some people are like very, very emphatic on this, like, we want to cut off certain philosophers we can't trust and only listen to certain ones that we do trust, and other people are like, now we'll listen to ones that like aren't right all the time, and we'll listen, like, even if they have some bad premises or some bad methodology, like I'll still listen to them and try to see what I can take from them and independently judge it. And I sort of fall on that side where you want to, like, I'll still listen to Charles too, even though I think he makes a lot of mistakes, and I agree with a lot of Puya's assessment of him, with some disagreements, of course, but I'll still listen to Charles. I don't take everything that he says very seriously all the time, though. I'm not going to like be like I was before, where it was like I would take things that he says very, very seriously, where I would like let it affect my life and like let it affect how I sort of did my job at times. Because remember his whole point about like
cutting corners
and stuff, and I took that to heart because I was like, I hate my job. I'm gonna do that, and it was not the right thing to do, obviously, but I sort of used some of the things that he would say as an excuse in that sense. You need to be able to judge philosophers, but the whole question of should you trust or distrust philosophers, and like should you, like, when you say trust a philosopher, it seems like you're implying that you should choose a certain philosopher, take what they say almost as dogma. Not necessarily. This is obviously a somewhat of an extreme representation of that idea, but this is sort of the principle involved. You take what they say sort of dogmatically and accept those ideas into you and distrust other philosophers. And that is a somewhat religious and dogmatic approach to things, I think.
Whatever it is Puya is advocating, it seems to be integrable with what you just said. He's not saying what you just said, of course.
Yeah, obviously not. I think that would be obviously absurd.
Yeah, right. Yeah. No, he's not. I mean, like, the man understands a lot of things about objectivism. He's not going to say that. But it would seem, and this is why a debate is so good, is because you'll end up rooting out the whatever actual premise the person holds, which seems to be integrable with it, or you'll realize that you misinterpreted him.
Yep.
That actually there's something learned here or whatever.
I mean, that's my initial assumption that I want to make, because I do think Puya is a smart guy. I really do think that it's just a misinterpretation and that it's sort of overblown. I mean, with the whole principles of like cooperability that KJ laid out in his thing, like I'm very focused on that. Like, I want to make sure that we can, like, I'm actually interpreting him right and not assigning a bunch of bad things to him, because that's one thing that Rucka was very critical of KJ on in his video.
Where can I see Rucka's critique of KJ?
Just look up Rucka Reacts.
Oh, Rucka did a video critiquing KJ.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm listening to that.
Yeah.
Oh, there he is. Oh my God, he made a little drawing of KJ. Oh my God. Oh my God. Rucka, if you're watching this, I am so impressed with this art. I don't even care what you say in this video. Even if I disagree with every one of it down to the word, this is a fantastic painting or whatever
Yeah.
illustration. We got a ghostly Kirk in the background for some reason. My God, I love this crap.
Rucka's thumbnails and backgrounds are always amazing and spot on. I
This
love
is
it.
the best by far in my view. We got a little
That's
baby
awesome.
with his little baby beanie. Uh,
Oh man, that's great.
I'm watching that. All right,
Yeah, for
cool.
sure. Yeah, for sure. But yeah, there's a I don't know if Rucka will watch this. We'll see. We'll see what he does. But I guess
But regardless, I'm really looking forward to us understanding, or you know, having this journey for those of us who want to really improve one another, go on this great
mhm,
journey of philosophy. Like think of Socrates. Think of that painting where Socrates is about to drink the poison. Before he drank that poison, all those guys, they were just chilling together, understanding more and more, talking, debating with one another. Like they were going on this journey of the mind towards greater and greater understanding and debating with one another, correcting each other's flaws. Like this is what we already have. And if we already have this, but what we can do is we can listen to KJ and have these, what would you call it? We can listen to KJ and have explicit views on how to conduct ourselves in these debates and how to learn
mhm.
from one another. And I mean, I think that's fantastic. I'm gonna have a lot of fun doing that. So
Yeah.
and
Hope,
I'm sure. And,
hopefully we can get these debates going between different objectivists. Imagine if we had like a Puya KJ debate. I don't know. I'm sure.
yeah, right. And this is all in the spirit of finding the truth. This isn't like, oh, I
Yeah.
want to see KJ just own
Yeah, for sure.
Puya. It's not. Although he may do so, he may make Puya feel really bad because Puya will
Puya
have to
may
face.
destroy KJ too, though. We'll see. Like if that's
We'll
what
see,
happens.
right? Yeah, but may the best opinion win,
Oh yeah,
right?
for
Like
sure.
we want to find the truth, and the person
Yeah.
who was wrong should feel crummy about it. Like, like okay,
hmm
I made a mistake, but like
hmm
that's life. That's
Yeah.
life. Like sometimes we feel bad. The reason we feel bad is so that we can see that we made a mistake and improve ourselves and get better. So
Yeah.
I think all of that is
And again, yeah, that's kind of one reason I got online as well, like to talk about these things, and like that's one thing that I've enjoyed quite a bit from this objectivist community. Like when I make a mistake, sometimes Ruck will call me out and send me a long post, a really long comment, and then we hash out our differences, and and then. Or like if I make a mistake with emotions, Frog Machine will do a response video to my video. Or like if I make a different mistake, I'll go on the DDV show and Diego will call me out on something. And yeah, it's all like I love this community, and they always like hold my feet to the fire when it comes to applying these principles and making sure that I'm actually applying these ideas correctly. And that's
cool.
one thing that is like, I don't know, like I wouldn't trade for anything. It's amazing to be having this
Nice.
channel and all this stuff.
I'll join on criticizing you publicly then.
Yes,
Or,
please do.
I mean, yeah, okay, yeah.
No ad homs
Um,
though. That's
yeah, well,
Oh yeah,
it's
for sure.
all
For sure,
it's
for
all
sure.
it's all in the spirit of improvement. And
Yeah.
another thing which I really liked, I saw in one of your videos, that one of your purposes is to document your intellectual progress. Just like with your journal, you were telling me earlier, it would appear as though you really like looking back and seeing that you were a Catholic and seeing all of this writing you had about how you believed in God and all these things that you thought about God. And then later you're an objectivist, like, and you can see that evolution in your journal. And now you're going to see even more evolution in your videos. That's cool. I dig it.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. It's exciting. These are exciting times, and the revolution is beginning.
Yeah. Yeah, something like that. The revolution in here, which is the important one.
Yep. Oh yeah,
yeah.
for sure. For sure, yeah. Yeah, I think we got a lot out. I didn't necessarily want to go into that whole like KJ Puya thing, but I don't know. I'm kind of glad we did now, because I think we got a lot of important integrations in there and like important framing of this. And if you disagree, go leave a comment. And if you leave a like, I'll get you a free spaceship. I've been watching a lot of Leafy lately, but yeah, because he came back. Sorry, do you know who Leafy is here is?
I only know about Leafy because Rucka mentioned him once.
Oh yeah, he's
Rucka was Leafy for a while, right?
what?
Rucka was Leafy for a while. He was like doing a Leafy show, right? I
I
don't
don't
know.
think
It's
so. I don't know. He made a song about Leafy, but yeah,
yeah.
he was posting all over about Leafy, and it's like, yeah, Leafy's back. Heck yeah. I used to watch him so much when I was younger, but it's nihilistic filth, honestly. No, I'm kidding, but
Yeah.
it's funny. It's funny stuff.
It's actually nihilistic filth.
No, 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 no. It's great.
Oh,
It's
you're
funny.
just
I
being
love it.
okay. You're just being it's the kind of thing Charles would disapprove of. But
Oh yeah. Charles would definitely disapprove of that.
okay.
But yeah, for sure. Um. Yeah. Do you have anything else you wanted to talk about, or we could call it here probably?
I think this is a great place to call it. I think we covered a lot of good things, and it's good. It's good the way it is.
Yeah, for sure. Sweet. Thank you. And then I think I'll just end the video here. Thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you all in the next video.
Thanks to